Good stuff. I got carried away. I was like, boss, I respect the guy. If he doesn't want to hear me, if he doesn't want to tolerate me, then I'll leave. It's okay. But okay.
हो गया भाई, मेरा कोटा तो हो गया 50-60 लोगों
मैं भी invite करो अभी sir.
का। हाँ
This
ये
is a
आशुतोष।
good room to have. Yeah,
हाँ
it's a good room to have.
हाँ, please ping the mutuals. We'll start in a couple of
Namaste,
minutes. Our replays on?
Ashutosh
Yes,
Bhaiya.
replays are on. So in the morning we kept a room, noodle price rise may cause a revolt against CCP in China. That was a good discussion. China is really going through tough times these days, and we are concerned about people of China. What I fail to understand is it has been 3-4 years of COVID, and the only strategy Chinese still know to deal with COVID is lockdown and imprisonment of people. What they have done is they have imprisoned close to 30 million people in Shanghai. They have shut the gates of apartment complexes from outside. There is huge shortage of food. People are dying of hunger. I mean, more than anything, leave apart hunger behind, leave apart basic amenities aside, right? You just can't imprison 20, 30 million people by force. If that's your strategy after 3 years of facing COVID virus, or rather introducing COVID virus to the world, then you are a failed state. You have no right to be called either as a developed or developing state. And that is the topic of today. In their arrogance, they are not taking help from global societies, from countries like India who have made effective vaccines, and they are still peddling that fake vaccine to their people who is not able to control the spread of the virus. And that is why, despite after 3 years, where everybody across the world has known to deal with corona pandemic, these guys still are using the barbaric tactics of locking down cities and imprisoning millions of people. So with this note, let's get some views. मुकुल जी, आयुष जी, नीरज जी, आयमदार जी, आशुतोष जी, नीचे से कोई ऊपर आना चाहे, प्लीज ऑल्सो वेलकम. At
Yeah,
least I
thank
need
you.
one person to start with. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for creating this room. So this is the whole pandemic that was inflicted is by China. Its origins are in China, right? When the pandemic started, they lied to the entire world. If you look at the data, now it's very clear. The pandemic started somewhere in 2018, October, even before that. But what they did was they hid the information from the world. They didn't say it's a pandemic, it's an unknown disease, nothing like that. They said it's another story whether it was a lab leaked or naturally occurred. I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going by what data that is available. So they started seeing some strange disease in Wuhan, and as per the protocol, they should have informed WHO, which they didn't. But Taiwanese got wind of it because they couldn't. They also didn't have any concrete information because Taiwanese monitor this Chinese very closely because they're very close. They faced a threat from them. That's how they got to know there's something strange going on. They implemented all the measures which they implemented for SARS a decade ago, or even earlier, right? So that's why Taiwan was less affected. But what CCP did was they stopped exporting all the protective gears like PPE kits, masks, and all those things. Not only that, by January or February, they had asked their companies in other countries who have nothing to do with healthcare or protective kit to buy the supplies which are available in those countries and ship it back to China. And that's when basically the whole world started seeing the shortage, and that's when the pandemic came into the public knowledge. right? In December, Chinese travel a lot. I mean, it's their New Year also. I mean, not in December as for English calendar, but Chinese calendar somehow coincides at that. It's somewhere around that time they travel a lot. So a lot of people from other countries went to China. They came back with the virus. That's how it was. There was a rapid spread. Now, after this came into public knowledge, basically people started profiting from the supplies, all those things. So they had started working on virus working on the vaccine way before others. Still, they couldn't come up with a proper vaccine. They come up with I don't know, some hodgepodge vaccine which didn't work. A lot of it got approval from WHO on an emergency basis. They exported it to a lot of other countries as well. Israel was one of the first countries who used their vaccines, and they found out that it's useless. They discontinued and went with other vaccines from Europe. So this is their history, right? Now, what's happening is they have vaccinated their people with this fake vaccine, and it's not working at all. Data is clearly available wherever people have been vaccinated. The symptoms are mild. It's in US also, it's almost going away. In India, it's almost normal because they have been vaccinated with a proper vaccine. So these people are fooling their own people. These people are fooling their own world. They are threat not only to their own people, they are threat to the entire world. CCP is basically a genocidal party. They have genocided their own people. They don't mind genociding others as well. There are a lot of CC officials on the social media. For example, they hire Western people to make positive videos about the Uyghurs, how happy they are in Xinjiang, and all those things. They go around with minders, CCP minders, and make these videos and publish that. They also had made one Western guy has also made a YouTube video comparing Indian railways and Chinese railways. In that, he shows that old Bangladeshi videos where people are hanging from the train. He put that as a the main picture of the video, right? And next to that, he shows the modern Chinese bullet train. So that's how they spread misinformation. That's why we need to talk about this Chinese virus. When I say virus, literally I mean the Wuhan virus, also a virus called CCP on social media. Yeah, with that I'll take a pause, but yeah, I'll go to the next person, whoever it is. Yeah.
Yes. So, but one is historical aspects,
Sir, I
being
just
brought.
received a back channel actually. Someone in the panel has blocked Shambhuji. So
Yeah, it's me.
if we
I'm not going
can.
to unblock him.
Acha, maybe allow him to come
Okay.
in, and,
Oh,
just
okay.
move down for a few minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he comes in and
if
then
he
you come back
promises
on.
to behave, I'll unblock him. So yeah.
No, no, as far as I know, he has always
आप एक
been a
काम कीजिए
gentleman.
ना
Just
सर,
remind
नीचे
him.
चले जाइए,
Yeah.
फिर वो आ जाएंगे, फिर वापस ऊपर आ जाइएगा. It will hardly make any difference, I believe.
Huh.
I mean,
नो नो नीचे जाने की जरूरत नहीं है विदाउट एनी प्रूफ इफ समवन कॉल्स somebody एंटी ब्राह्मण that is rubbish and I don't support it,
No,
right?
even I don't support,
But how
that.
can he say it, Andolanji, in front of you itself? He came on the stage, he disrupted the stage, he called San anti-Brahmin. When did you see San anti-Brahmin? I don't want to discuss here, but
Huh.
please don't endorse that kind of person.
Hmm. Up to Sam. I mean, he is also a moderator of
let
the
us,
room. This is
if
Sam's
we
call.
are
Yeah.
required to, so I'll just, text him that, मतलब ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. Should I mean,
Yeah, I
because
will see, guys. I will unblock him if he
नहीं,
behaves.
in block वाली बात
I
नहीं है,
won't do anything.
and no one can guarantee whether he if he is going to behave or not. So,
No,
uh,
if he doesn't behave, we can always throw him out. No
of
worries.
course, okay.
Let's.
So I'll just say,
Yeah, if some, I don't know, I don't have his profile. If somebody can back channel his profile, I'll unblock him for this room. Yeah.
निशामानंद जी ऊपर आ जाइए. One thing I've seen, Nisamanan, getting an expertise into a subject area is only a matter of a couple of hours. So you use some kind of data mining techniques, Nisamanan?
No, actually, I don't come up into the panel in which I don't have much knowledge. I have knowledge due to this in medical field, so you will find me talking on the medical field and the cultural field. So I talk in those two fields. The remaining field, yeah, and defense being
But
my interest.
today morning when I heard you on the vaccine and those details, I was actually quite surprised. I mean, good amount of information. Thanks
Yeah,
for
that
sharing it in the morning.
yeah,
Yeah,
that is what I'm saying. I got two things. I means two things are my interest. One is being from the medical field. I have interest in the medical field, so I have that. And the other thing is the cultural and being from a family where this culture has been given interest. So that part and the other things I about few things about China and all else we should be aware of. So I learned those parts. These are the things. So I don't come up into the panel in which I don't have knowledge.
great, great.
Just
So let us move on to Ayushi.
yeah. Thank you, Anjulanji. Thank you, everyone. And yes, when we basically talk about the origin of COVID-19 from China, officially speaking, the top health organization, the world, that is World Health Organization itself, I mentioned that the origin of COVID-19 was from the marketplace or the animal market, in Wuhan. So you look into, it's pretty much clear that the majority of the knowledge that we have about the origin of COVID-19, it is actually tilting towards China. Now, the point is that whenever we talk about how Chinese have ultimately went up with their policies of COVID-19, they ultimately have chosen a very aggressive policy of what is called zero COVID-19 policy. And as Andolanji rightly mentioned, that policy is not a new policy by the CNOs, but this policy has been brought up by the early days since the COVID-19 emerged officially according to the Chinese Communist Party, which was on the 31st of December of 2019, where the whole 1.4 billion people of Chinese were busy celebrating the new year. The thing is, you try to understand that under COVID-19 principles, what used to be the thing. COVID-19 principle is ultimately a very unilateral, myopic way through which you control the COVID-19. And also the thing is, I believe technically, medically, scientifically, it is not feasible. Scientifically, what happens is, when you go through the World Health Organization report about the origin or how COVID-19 actually spreads, COVID-19 actually also spreads via the air. So even though you try to stop the so-called human-to-human transmission, you cannot actually control and curb down the so-called air-to-air transmission. So that again, in that case, COVID-19 scientifically falls down. First thing. Second thing, what happens is when you try to understand, COVID zero principles with terms of the physical aspect, you also need to understand the so-called economical repercussions which the COVID-19 has. It is absolutely huge. Now, going through certain more nitty-gritties, you try to understand which are the countries who have followed the COVID-19. The 3 to 4 countries which comes into my mind was Australia, Jacinda Ardern government of New Zealand. The third was absolutely the oriental part of the world, which was heavily dominated by the Chinese, and third the Hong Kong. Let's consider Hong Kong as a different territory to that of the Chinese. The thing that you need to understand is that Code Zero principles was something when the countries opted for the Code 19 principles, specifically the Tasman countries or Tasman countries of Australia and New Zealand, despite posing the Code Zero principles, they ultimately witnessed a huge surge of Code 19. Now that was the result why Scott Morrison government was actually, forced to bring a transition because of the national ambition. Because the people thought that even though you see that how actually Sydney and how Melbourne witnessed the world most toughest and not toughest but world most longest period of COVID-19. It was almost shut from 2020 to that of the first half of 2022. It's been almost January when there has been a certain unlock. The thing is, when you even put the countries or when you even put the territories under COVID zero, what happens is, despite even that, the cases used to increase. It has increased in Wellington, that is in New Zealand. It has increased in the other territories of Australia. It has also increased in China. Now the thing is, whenever we talk about China, one place that comes into mind is actually the so-called even Beijing and Shanghai. But to be very frank, Shanghai and Beijing are the secondary part where they have witnessed that. Rather, it all started with the region of Tianjin. It all started with the region of Jiang. What happened was in the first to second half of 2021, the region of Jian and Tianjin witnessed a huge surge of COVID-19. And the thing was, because of that, they ultimately put almost 1.3 million, rather, yes, 1.3 million population under lockdown in Jian and in Tianjin. Now, what happened because of that? Even there was certain demand that were being raised by the people of Jian and Tianjin, that they were suffering from some of the basic necessities like food and the various other things. So it all started with Jiang and Tianjin, and even from Jiang and Tianjin, they haven't learned. They actually just inherited that to ultimately the other regions of Beijing and the other region of Shanghai. And we all know that how when people, how videos went out viral and how there has been certain repercussion in that aspect. And economically, you see their economy since COVID-19 has ultimately originated, it hasn't increased up to the mark of 4.5, because you cannot actually expect their economy to boom, because they ultimately lock down the regions which are considered to be the hotspot and which are considered to be the growth engines for the Chinese. That is the thing. Now, when I talk about the vaccines that are typically available in the Chinese, there are basically three vaccines which has been predominantly inoculated to the population of 1.4 billion people. One is actually the Sinopharm, the other is actually the Sinovac, and the other is the CoronaVac. Now, CoronaVac was the vaccine which has been used by the Chinese government to inoculate the population below the years of 18, and the Sinopharm and Sinovac has been used to inoculate the population above the age of 18. And to be very frank, no one actually knows the efficacy. Let me tell you that some of the Western scientists who have been involved in research, they even, some of the virologists specifically, they even have mentioned the likes of Sinopharm and Sinovac efficacy is almost below 50%. Now, in the in the virologist world, any vaccine whose efficacy is actually below 50%, that vaccine must not be considered, or even it doesn't make any sense if that vaccine is inoculated, even though. So that is the thing. So if the efficacy is below 50%, it doesn't make any sense, even though you are inoculated, but again, you are much more exposed to COVID-19. Since no one in the world actually knows the effectiveness, and there has been certain data, because the thing
Uh,
is, when you look into the wave of COVID-19 in China, and
Ayushi,
specifically the
there is
yeah,
a
yeah,
Lancet
Abhijit.
report which has come up recently, which is talking about the efficacy rate of the Chinese vaccine. Nisha Manan, can you send me that Lancet report? I'll paste it up.
I
The
send
efficacy of the
you,
Chinese vaccine is
Anjali,
36, 37%. Yeah,
I have sent you in the back channel, in that room only. I sent you. Just check the
I'll do
last
that.
that I
Yeah.
have sent that you. Yeah,
That
and I am saying that in short, IOC, with due respect, you just made a bit of mistake. It is the vaccine they made was the CoronaVac, and the company that made it was Sinovac Pharma. But the funny part of it, I could not still now chew this fact. Its Sinovac Pharma is in Hedai district of Beijing, and before this CoronaVac, there three previous were. It was established in somewhere between 1999 or 2000, if I'm not wrong. Then before this means CoronaVac, there before was the enterovirus 71, then the influenza vaccine, and the by the name of Anflu and hepatitis A. And the problem with all these vaccines were their efficacy rates were below 50%. I could not get how can a government be so irresponsible that they are giving this means it was when it was just spreading in full fledged, and you are giving your whole means you are putting the whole life of all the citizen of China in stake and giving it to a company who has not produced a vaccine till now in their whole 22 years of career, a vaccine that has efficacy rate of over 50%. That too, the hepatitis A or leave alone hepatitis A, the influenza virus vaccine was not above 50%. So this is where we should call out China, that how
So,
irresponsible
and
Yeah.
CCP
it
So
government
is
of
so
China.
it is
I have
quite
a simple
evident.
question.
Just a small point I have. So, this is precisely the reason we are holding this room today. Today, as we speak, the world faces one of the largest humanitarian crises. 30 million people are imprisoned in the city of Shanghai with very limited access to food, water, and basic necessities. And the world has turned away its eyes from this humanitarian disaster, where imprisonment of 20 to 30 million Chinese citizens is happening with legal sanction from the CCP government, just to hide one fact that their vaccine doesn't work. It was an illusion.
I
Had the
would
vaccine, had the vaccine been working like in any other part of the world, they would have not required to imprison 20 to 30 million people. And this is a message we want to get some feedback from people who have been supporting China claim, who have been talking about China's growth. If growth means fooling your people by pumping in something which is not a vaccine, or a vaccine that has an efficacy rate of 37%, that is 3% more than the normal human body inbuilt capability to counter, coronavirus. 33%, Nisamanan, if I'm not wrong, 32 to
yeah, yeah,
33%
33.
is the
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the natural is the
yeah.
It's
just
30.
33.
one second.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30. Yeah. So if you're giving a vaccine to maintain the same level of resistance which was possible without having a vaccine, and you were arrogant enough not to take help from US, not to take, we have given vaccines to a lot of poor countries. India has given vaccines to a lot of poor countries. If China would have asked for it,
No, no. The
I'm
other is
sure.
not only poor countries. We have given vaccine to some of the well-reputed
No, I
countries
was
like
not saying
there's
poor. I'm saying poor countries, right? I mean, poor countries
yeah.
predominantly. We give them free, right? I'm sure if China government would have requested India, right, we would have manufactured more, vaccine and helped the people of China.
Yeah. So may I go now, Andolanji?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I have 2 points, but before I start those 2 points, I would just like to answer this point that by their own claims, right? Lancet found 38% efficacy, but by their own estimates, they had efficacy of 50%. But the problem that happened at the very beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, is that many global thinkers thought that there would be some kind of a, uh, you know, I forget the term for it, but the idea that if somebody gets coronavirus once, they will not get it again, and then there will be crowd effect. Nisamanji, I forgot the term for it. There will be some kind of a group,
Crowd immunity.
crowd immunity, right?
Herd
And
Yeah,
immunity.
herd
It
immunity.
hard
herd
good
immunity, right?
immunity.
Exactly. So a lot of people thought that herd immunity would happen, but if herd immunity would happen, then there would not be wave one, wave two, wave three, and now in Bombay, what we are seeing is that there's like a wave four happening, or at least giving signs of happening. So China would have been right if herd immunity theory had been right, you know. And a lot of these WHO people were propounding this theory that no, India mein to, India will, half of India will die, and then we will achieve herd immunity. That is the only place India will find. Boss, you were wrong. We got a better vaccine, you know, and the herd immunity theory doesn't play out at all, right? So that's my that's my 0th point. I'll come to my first 2 points. Is that number one? When Andolanji said, I'll just touch upon the idea that there is this Chinese growth idea that the China grew so very fast, so very well with their theories and with their governance, that therefore they're somehow superior. And in the prior room, we were talking about how Chinese are actually racist against India right now. If you go and interact with Chinese people on Twitter or in person,
No, in the
right?
morning itself, I just
Hmm.
to add it, in the morning
Hmm.
itself, a Chinese gentleman came up. He was discussing very politely, and when he finally lost the argument, he said, "If you raise this up, there would be nuclear fight between China and India."
सर यहाँ
Okay.
पर
Anjuman ji,
on
you
on
just noted.
our own very clubhouse, ब्रह्मा जी के रूम में वो एक आता है ना, HK Smurf. He's a Chinese supremacist. There are plenty of Chinese supremacists on Twitter and Clubhouse. वो सीधे सीधे आपको बोलेंगे कि China has achieved so much growth rate. Why are Hindus lacking? अरे भाई, that is because you have like a authoritarian government. You have a
We
dictator.
are not imprisoning 30 million people, and we haven't
हाँ
we
सर,
don't have the blood of 400 million unborn kids on our hand, and neither
हाँ
do
हाँ,
have we caused famines by killing sparrows across our country.
उनको भूल जाओ ना, उनको भूल जाओ सर। जो बाकी जो नॉन मुस्लिम्स हैं, नॉन उइगुर्स हैं, उनको भी तो ये लोग डेली मार्चिंग ऑर्डर देते हैं ना। आपको याद होगा उनकी फॉक्सकॉन फैक्ट्रीज में कितने सुसाइड हुए?
But
आपको
let's
याद
let's
होगा
let's
कि
stick
उनके
to the topic. The idea is not China bashing.
नहीं नहीं
But
नहीं नहीं,
my
that's
concern
not,
today is those 20,
I'm
30
coming to the
million
second point
people,
सर।
right?
वो
It's a
मेरा सेकंड पॉइंट है,
humanitarian crisis. हाँ,
वो मेरा सेकंड पॉइंट है, वो मेरा सेकंड पॉइंट है। कोविड मेरा सेकंड पॉइंट है। फर्स्ट पॉइंट इज दैट हाउ चाइना इटसेल्फ, Chinese people themselves repose their faith in their own government. That is why their government is able to do so much. भाई, अगर इंडिया भी अगर अथॉरिटेरियन होता है, जिस तरह से मोदी को ये लोग अथॉरिटेरियन बोलते हैं, तो हम लोग तो कभी प्रोटेस्ट नहीं करते। बट हम प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं, हम डेली बेसिस पे हम कश्मीर पॉलिसी पे प्रोटेस्ट करते हैं, हम डेली बेसिस पे हम लोग बोलते हैं कि भाई आप क्या कर रहे हो इकोनॉमी में। Even
but
Modi supporters, BJP
one
supporters।
small point, that also is a
सर
mirage,
सर मेरी
right?
बात
Sorry,
पूरी हो
I'm
जाने,
sorry.
मेरी बात
हाँ,
पूरी हो जाने दीजिए ना, मेरी बात पूरी हो
हाँ,
जाने दीजिए सर प्लीज। हाँ, सो ये चाइनीज जो हैं और चाइनीज सपोर्टर्स इंडिया में जो हैं, ये एक तरह से रेसिस्ट हैं, ये एक तरह से प्रो अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म है। अगर आप बोलो कि भाई मैं आज स्लेव बना लूं सारे इंडियंस को, अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म नथिंग बट स्लेवरी। अगर आप बोलो कि गवर्नमेंट हैज द राइट टू मेक स्लेव्स ऑफ इट्स ओन सिटीजंस, तो फिर तो कुछ भी पॉसिबल है, फिर तो पिरामिड्स बन जाए इंडिया में। पिरामिड्स भी स्लेव से बने थे। So that is the first answer, right? And that leads to the second question about COVID, right? COVID क्या है? See, before this thing happened, before the second wave and third wave, and आज जो शंघाई में देख रहे हैं हम लोग, before this thing happened, I also thought कि भाई ये तो चाइना ने चाइना की conspiracy है। China has intentionally spread COVID across the world to kind of subdue everyone else, subdue the standard of geopolitics in the world. बट अब आज मैं देख रहा हूँ कि भाई चाइना में भी यही हो रहा है। तो अब तो मुझे लग रहा है कि भाई दे आर मेड इन चाइना कैसे शुरू हुआ था? मेड इन चाइना शुरू हुआ
30
था
seconds, I like.
सर 2 मिनट दीजिए ना सर, आप इतना इंटरप्ट किया आपने, 2 मिनट दीजिए। तो मेड इन चाइना यूएस में आज भी इज एसोसिएटेड विद बैड क्वालिटी वर्क, बैड क्वालिटी वर्क। चाइना ने, एंड वी नो फॉर श्योर, वी नो फॉर अ फैक्ट कि चाइना में ये जो these kind of weird labs, I forgot the term for medical term for it, निशा मेनन जी को पता होगा, these labs were intentionally set up by America in China, kind of like nuclear containment, कि भाई अगर एक्सपेरिमेंट गड़बड़ हो जाए तो फिर अमेरिकन शुड नॉट गेट अफेक्टेड बाय इट। तो उसमें भी लो क्वालिटी थी, दे हैड लो क्वालिटी, वहां से उनसे एक्सीडेंटल लीक हुआ, और फिर जब वैक्सीन बनाने की बात आई तो वैक्सीन भी उन्होंने मेड इन चाइना वैक्सीन बना दी, राइट? मेड इन चाइना वैक्सीन एज इन लो क्वालिटी वैक्सीन। सो इधर भी जब व्हेन इट केम टू रिसर्च, they were bad quality, it was bad quality research which allowed that virus to escape, and इधर भी जब वैक्सीन बनाने की बात आई तब भी they were unable to make good enough vaccine which could protect their own people. Those are my simple points. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anji. So one of the points you raised is actually a misconception among a lot of people that Chinese people are with or support CCP. It is only the CCP stooges who get the access to social media, right? I mean, let's not forget that access to social media
That makes sense.
is
Yeah, that
banned
makes
in
sense.
China. Yeah, access to social media is banned in China. So the only people, most of the people that you find on these platforms, which is the open platforms restricted to an average Chinese, is a propagandist of CCP. Nobody else, because the Chinese government would not allow him to come on an open platform. So keep that in mind. Second is, one of the major factors with my data suggests that 60 to 70% of the Chinese do not support CCP. And I come to that conclusion because, the only places in China which are open to media scrutiny or external media scrutiny are Hong Kong and Taiwan. And the data of Hong Kong and Taiwan clearly suggest that 60 to 70% of Hong Kong and Taiwan are anti CCP. Now, what we have to do is extrapolate that data into mainland as well. The only problem is there is no media information which is coming out of mainland, except for a few, propagandists who are supported by CCP to come on open platforms. Otherwise, normal mainlander is not allowed to come on a application like Clubhouse or Twitter or other things. So let us. So my concern is towards the people of China, and specifically those 20-30 million people which are currently locked up without access to basic amenities. I mean, locking up itself is any which ways they had very less amount of freedom, but now they are getting physically
Not
restrained
only,
inside their
sorry
apartment
to interject.
complexes.
Sorry to interject. Not only the common people in that lockdown, some around, if I'm not wrong, 340 doctors have also been imprisoned in the same area. They are being put there that they can just give the initial treatment, and you can look at the YouTube video out there where the doctor is just crying and saying that, yeah, I want to treat my patient, but I have been not been provided with the ample amount of medicine or the facilities that is needed to treat them. You can find the videos out there. It is just going pathetic.
Right. So Gyan Bhai is here. Gyan Bhai has a legal, this thing. Gyan Bhai, I mean, I'm not sure whether you practice global law or not, but locking of 20 million, 30 million people in the city of Shanghai, isn't this should be against the U.S. Charter of Basic Freedom and this thing, or it's China all the way and nobody objects to it.
See,
Why is this happening?
so far as this international law is concerned, and the manner in which the Communist Party of China rules China, it's a single party rule, and it's a kind of dictatorship actually. So it's always against the UN Charter of Human Rights. But the thing is that when it comes to the UNO, it has more become more a political body, and in the UN Human Rights Commission, China is the member. So it reports that there's no human rights violation in China, or it shows at a very dim light. But if we see the position of Uyghur Muslims and the concentration camps, which are being run in the name of vocational training by Communist Party, and many other things, whatever is happening in Shanghai, Singapore, and all these things, they are badly against the international norms. So the thing is that there is old power of might is right. So China is going that way. So since it's now rival of US in new Cold War era, therefore nobody dares to do anything for human rights or on these issues. So nowadays I find that there's no international body which can go against the might of US or China on the other side. Therefore, they are doing whatever they want. We can raise voice, but nothing will come out. It's a matter of might only, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, locking up 30 million people, I can understand what they're doing to younger population, that may be because of to control and curb terrorism. But locking up 30 million normal citizens of their own people, I mean, somewhere people are not even raising this concern that their failure to control COVID, their failure to make a decent vaccine, and who is suffering? 20-30 million people of Shanghai. Shay, any opinion here? Shay
One,
and then
one, one
ND.
more thing I like to say here. Yeah, I feel that these communist parties around the world, they plan their things. They go by the agenda, which is far beyond 50 years or 70 years or 100 years. They live in that kind of world. So what I sometimes think is that China, it's preparing for a biological war at mass level, and they are the people of that kind. They can wipe out countries, and they can wipe out mass population. They can create mass destructions. So I feel that they are developing different kind of viruses and all these things, and they are preparing for biological weapons. And I also read somewhere that uh, this communist manifesto of Mao, it has the philosophy of this Mao that has got one whole chapter on biological warfare. So this ideology of communism is so much radical that they can do anything and everything, thanks to the former USSR that was disintegrated. But which I don't know that what would be the fate if the war would have occurred at that time, because it was they were talking of Star Wars at that time in 90s, before the collapse of USSR. Now the thing is that China is going far beyond that. So we have to prepare on that lines, that how to save ourselves. And thanks to this Modi ji government, that they have planned for at least one hospital in every district, one medical college in every district. So it's also a kind of preparation. So we need to be cautious about China. Thank you.
Thank you, Yari. Shay, Ashutoshi.
Yeah. So I just want to concur. I think somebody else pointed. I mean, as you point out, a lot of people there are currently being confined. I think somebody else brought this up as well. The Tianjin University, I think, is facing the worst protests. And imagine just being like confined to your dorm as a student, and you're made you're made to pay fees, and you're just sitting there in your dorm. You're not allowed to leave. So of course they're gonna vent out all that anger. But the problem that I see is that it's spread to like Beijing, like I think Peking University, where the elites, where the kids of all these elite people go, like they have also started protesting. So that's worrisome, because when the kids of your elite, so-called elite or whatever, are having an issue with your dictatorial kind of regulations, then that's a real problem, because they're not going to tolerate it. You might be able to do this shit to some people in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, but Beijing, I think that's a cause of concern for them. So I don't know. I'm just concerned. That's about it.
One very noticeable factor that we have noticed about China, right? They say we don't believe in religion, we believe in merit, and we believe in science, right? And all those stuff, motherhood statements. But the whole, 30 years of progress, they could not produce a decent vaccine. I mean, is this the ego that's taking 20 million, 30 million people inside gallows in their own apartments? Or is it something else? आशुतोष जी, एंडी जी.
जी जी धन्यवाद। एक्चुअली ऐसा है कि we should remember how it all started with when the news started coming in to the world that there is a new virus out there. If you remember, during the times of H1N1 or other flu viruses, SARS virus, the panic wasn't this much. It wasn't severe in the first place. I'm sure many people remember the very first video which a guy made. He was working in a lab, and he actually sent it to somebody who put it on Twitter and then on other social media, stating that the world should beware that this virus is really contagious and deadly, and they should do everything in their power to stop it. And he was a lab technician or a doctor, I do not remember, a Chinese guy, well-meaning guy. And immediately he was quarantined, and within the next few days he died. So I actually tend to think so. If China actually has a trait, they like to maintain their image of both secrecy and dignity, or some kind of honor. Honor is a very big thing out there. So whether or not the virus emanated from their bushmeat market, or it came from their lab as a deliberate attempt, it wasn't an attempt, actually, it was a deliberate ploy. So whichever way it happened, China had to cut a sorry figure. So they immediately quarantined that guy, but by then the damage was done. Even when the people were quarantined, then the virus by that time had spread to different parts of the world, especially in United States. We all remember 911, the deaths and the event, everything was absolutely spectacular, gory, spectacular. Right now, there is no way to create or demand reparations for all the fatalities that have occurred due to this virus all over the world. Only some 3,200 plus people died in 911. In this case, since it is a silent killer, how many people died? We are still counting numbers, and data from China hasn't even come out. I actually tend to believe some conspiracy theories here that say that when Modi was re-elected, and I'm sorry to take this little political detour, he had said that अब तक हम ठीक चल रहे थे, धीमी रफ्तार से चल रहे थे, अब हम और स्पीड पकड़ेंगे. And that was actually a testament to the power he wielded, and he wanted to fast track India's supply chain, India's manufacturing, and bring more foreign direct investment to India. And that did not bode well with China, so they ended up releasing this virus. There goes one conspiracy theory. So that actually had devastating effect not only on India but all over the world. But India somehow managed by imposing a very, very strict lockdown. And at the same time, India went into super drive to create vaccines. If you remember clearly that companies like Pfizer and all, where their internal emails also showed the efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine up to 12%, the data which was given to the public, it showed that Pfizer and AstraZeneca, they have their efficacies up to 90% and 85% respectively. In fact, the Latin American countries who were so besieged in order to get those vaccines, Pfizer went there and demanded the sovereign assets of those countries. Now, sovereign assets could be land or in other way, the debt, whichever way they wanted it nevertheless. India did not get into that trap because India had faith in the capabilities of its scientists. And what I think India lacked at that time was something known as the distribution channel. Distribution channels were created. Also, in the southern India, many PPE kit plants were created, so India didn't have to import. India definitely wasn't, even when India was about to ask these companies about vaccines, to import some vaccines, they saw what was happening to the LATAM countries. At the same time, India also realized that, people have to do it on their own. So few particular services were stretched very thin. Number one, the police forces in all states. They were stretched super thin in order to impose lockdowns. Second, the medical services all over the country were spread, they were spread super thin. At the same time, it was also important to boost the morale of the country. So all those things actually were coming into effect at one time. Now, there also goes one theory that American fatalities were more because Americans are pretty habitual to getting annual vaccines. And that has lowered their immunity to a great extent. I believe it to be true. It is true. And that's why many of them could not survive the onslaught of this particular virus. In other countries, when India saw that India not only can fulfill the needs of their own patients, but can also give the medicine to other countries, India saw it as not only as a goodwill gesture, but also to build some credibility and, which India could encash later. So India did that without any money, without anything. India continued to supply those vaccines. At the same time, India ensured something else. India said that we are going to let states buy their own vaccines, because states at that time, especially the non-BJP ruled states, they were clamoring for vaccines and they were clamoring for money. They said, okay, center should release funds so that we can go and negotiate on our own. And when they went and they found themselves,
आशुतोष भाई थोड़ा सा चाइना
चाइना, हाँ, मैं चाइना पर आता हूँ। तो मैं वहीं जा रहा हूँ मैं, सॉरी। मेरी थोड़ी ना आदत है बात को थोड़ा लंबा घुमा के देने की, तो
हाँ, मैं
मुझे
इसीलिए
माफ़
मैं
कीजिएगा।
थोड़ा सा डायरेक्शन मैंने इसीलिए आपको कहा जरा थोड़ा सा कंधा हिला के सही डायरेक्शन में ले जाए।
कोई बात नहीं, थैंक्स फॉर डूइंग दैट, दैट्स ओके। तो देन स्टेट्स एक्चुअली दे फाउंड देमसेल्व्स woefully short, and at that time, if you remember, so Andy Mukherjee popped up. This guy, he's a paid China shill. He sits in Hong Kong. And Andy Mukherjee actually went on record saying that India should buy Chinese vaccines. And he specially gave this figure, which is not a fact at all, that Sinovac in Indonesia has an efficacy, it has been found to be up to 90%. It's a blatant lie. Indonesia isn't going to counter that, but because nobody has data as to how many Sinovac doses were administered to people. So the China also had the same thing as, policy of managing things like exams are managed in Bihar. All you have to do is you have to manage the invigilator, you have to manage the paper leaker, you have to manage the teacher who's going to evaluate exams. So China managed the news of the virus. China managed the World Health Organization. Whatever statements were coming out, they were curbed. And the WHO chief was made to eat his words. At the same time, we had an equivocating guy in America known as Dr. Anthony Fauci, because nobody wanted to take responsibility. Nobody wanted to get sued. Nobody wanted that liability. Doctors in America are pretty notorious for that.
30
So,
seconds of the story.
gee, huh. So finally, it so happened, I think that's okay. Mm. I think I lost my train of thought, so please carry on. I
Sorry.
think it.
I think we were going to too many places, so maybe you may want to regroup and recome. By that time, I'll probably,
That's all
go
right.
to.
I think others should get a chance to speak because I'm pretty sure that while some people like to listen to me, some do not at all.
No,
So
no,
that is
we
their
love to
bad
hear to
habit.
you. We love to hear to you, Ashutoshi. Please don't take it otherwise. But I think we were,
No,
the focus of the room was more towards, the China's inability to, with the COVID policy and imprisoning 20, 30 million people. I think that was the
there
focus
is
of
one
the
final
discussion.
fact to say that they flooded the city of Wuhan by opening the floodgates of the dam and saying that all the evidence and all the labs are washed out.
Oh, is
So
it that
I
part I missed? Okay.
Yeah, Andoranji, that is what. Do you remember in the morning, as soon as I made that point that your whole crops was being washed out due to the flood and the re-flood, and that's why you had to put a lock on the Shanghai because you don't have the crop for the food. That is the time Tiger just came trying to hound me down because they did not want the whole world to know about that. That they
Okay. So this is somehow I missed it in the media or it didn't came in media.
No. It was tried to be put in the closed radars, but some of the private organizations out there have put that report.
Yeah, it
That
has
was
come out in the
that's what
media.
that is
It is in the media.
Okay. So somehow
okay.
I probably might have missed it. Aish, you wanted to say something? Then we'll go to Coffee and Jai Hind and Jay.
Yeah, just one point, Andulan ji, since we talk about the Chinese vaccine. What I believe is where Chinese vaccine lagged was in terms of the diversification. So earlier, when the so-called inoculation process all around the world started, it all started with the Sputnik, which, to be very frank, has a very decent amount of the efficacy. The thing is, many people earlier thought that the so-called mRNA vaccine would have a certain advantage compared to the other vaccine, and mRNA, which includes the like of Pfizer and Moderna specifically. But with the data and with the other evolution and inclusion of the vaccines in the market, the change and methodology has changed. Now you see that a vaccine which has been built from a certain more advantage way would have a certain more upliftment compared to the other vaccine. That is the reason that why when you look into the Bharat Biotech Covaxin vaccine, it has a certain advantage compared to the other. That is first thing. And I believe the flood points which has been brought in. So it's a very interesting Andolanji that the so-called in second half of 2020 what happened. when United States of America forced World Health Organization and Mr. Tedros to ultimately send a team for a proper investigation into China, they ultimately done two things, Andolanji, which is very important to understand. And somehow the other, I believe, has been anonymous. So whenever we try to understand and try to find whether there is this pan transmission of COVID-19, we merely do not go for an individual to individual testing. Rather, we go for what is called sewage waste testing. And that is the reason that why in the second wave, India went for even a sewage waste treatment, because in a sewage, you even though if you find the particles of COVID-19, we used to consider that okay, this area is under the impact of COVID-19. So what used to happen, sir, when the so-called World Health Organization team ultimately went to Wuhan and the other regions of China, Chinese government actually didn't allow the World Health Organization team to even test the sewage. The reason was because they said that according to our local laws, we do not actually invite the international players to go for the sewage transmission. That is first thing, because if the World Health Organization team went for a sewage waste transmission, I'm pretty much sure they would have find a decent amount of observation from this. Second thing is, in order to avoid the invite and the entry of World Health Organization, they went for what is called artificial rain, and that artificial rain had actually a negative impact and a negative scene over China, and it ultimately led down into a huge flood-like situation, knowing the fact that there hasn't been natural rain to even bring on the floods, but rather there was this so-called artificial rain which has been brought in order to do the flood. So that is, sir, CCP and Chinese strategy, which people really do not know, but that is how they have been creating the so-called critics, Andalanji. That are my points.
Anduranji, I will just make few small points about the mRNA vaccine.
Sure.
Many
But I had a small
research.
question also on the same, Nisamaran, because about a month back I was reading few articles on the efficacy rate of Pfizer being questions dramatically. So somebody was calling it, some media reports, 19% efficacy, 20%
No,
efficacy. I
as
mean,
I mentioned in the morning also, for the PI, means the first version, the CL, means the CL Corona, the first initial strain, it was around 68 to 73, and but for the new, means the mod, means the after the mutation, the PSTV vaccine, means the PSTV, the Corona that we are having, the new strain, it has an efficacy of around 38 to it has an efficacy of around something around 62 to 63. It is very less as compared to Covaxin. Covaxin has an efficacy of around 80 for the mutated one also. That is why the Covaxin in some of the hospitals are being traced. That still the research is going out if it can be given as a medicine or not. The Covaxin, it is probably a Rio de Janeiro lab is going for that research. There are research going in the Germany also, and if I'm not wrong, in Hungary also there is some research institute who is doing the research that if Covaxin can be given as a treatment, as you know, Europe has been hit miserably by this corona, so they are trying to do it. And now coming to the mRNA, why I want to make few points about mRNA vaccine. The problem of the mRNA vaccine will be the general cons of mRNA vaccines are, if they sometimes as it is the RNA you are putting in, sometimes it might if it might go for the splicing and get attached into your DNA, that can lead to myocarditis. That can be a major problem. Till now it has not been tested so much, but just in this also there has been report that 5% of the patient has suffered myocarditis. I will send you the result also. I will send you the reports also.
5%.
Yeah, 5% has.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, for the testing, for the first round of testing batch, it's a good amount. Then it is not. It is just a start. One third of the patients have suffered fatigue after the first dose, and the fatigue lasted for around 8 to 10 days. While after the second dose, 56% reported fatigue that lasts for around 17 days. Headaches were reported for 27% after the first dose, compared to 46% after the second dose. Injection site were very painful usually the injection sites were very painful. Then it's about one third reports patients said they were unable to work or do normal activities after the second dose, even for a month. While similar reports of the first dose came for 12% of the patient, fewer than as I said that myocarditis. Then if someone is over 65, especially women, they had severe side effects of it, like like the breaking of the bones was also in some cases it was being found. So mRNA vaccines, the whole world might claim many of things, but still now the mRNA vaccine has not been that great. It has some good amount of it
Mm.
has some good amount of cons to it.
So
I'm sending you the report.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
Nisamanaji, when this COVID was at its peak and India introduced the vaccine, right? There were two vaccines. One is the AstraZeneca
Mhm.
one, and the other one, the Covaxin, the Indian,
Yeah.
pure Indian one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow I saw the interview of this guy, the owner of, Bharat Biotech, right?
Biotic, yeah.
And
Mhm.
somehow he sounded so honest, that I made up my mind that I will inject only Covaxin inside my body. And initially there was shortage of Covaxin, right? It was not
Right.
available in the free centers, right? So I made it a point that me and my family, spend almost $20 per shot. But we got the Covaxin itself, and it seems we made the right decision. Would that be a correct
Yeah.
thing to say?
Yeah, I would agree to it. I would totally agree to it because as the efficacy rate is better, so why to go for the AstraZeneca when we know that the efficacy of our home-built vaccine was better? It was just, and the reason for it, the simple reason for it is that attenuated, if whenever an initial vaccine is produced, if it is from the attenuated one, it will be better. So that was the simple thing that Bharat Biotech did, that they go with the age-old method, and probably it seemed that it was the right one. It was the right decision made by them. Yeah, and Anuji, I have sent you in the back channel the report if you can put that about the mRNA vaccine.
Okay. So let us go to Coffee. Coffee has been here for a while. Coffee, any views on the subject?
Okay, I'll tell you a bit about my background. I am a doctor born and brought up in India, being very proud of the country, lived for many years, but currently working in the National Health Service in England. Okay, look, you guys are using this as a Chinese, you need to give me a chance to speak, Chinese bashing site. Let me just tell you, China is much prepared and they know what they are doing. Okay, the technology and whatever, India is nowhere near China. Okay, Indian second wave was a completely hidden data. Nothing has come. I was panicking that
You
when
claim you're a doctor, but you
look,
sound illiterate.
look, be literate and let me speak. Okay,
It's okay. Let's
okay,
hear about. It's okay.
okay. Let me speak. Okay, so when the second wave was brewing in England, I knew what's coming to India. Okay, so I could see what the government's preparedness for the second wave and completely hidden the facts under the carpet. Be honest, man. Okay, that's the moral. Okay, be honest. Okay, look, China, people are living in a much better quality of life. You need to go and see. Okay, it's not like
I
Yeah,
take
yeah.
people living
We are seeing Shanghai.
in a
We are
street of
seeing Shanghai.
Delhi.
an
Okay,
objection there. I will
okay,
not let
they're
this
not like
happen.
people living. They care
Okay.
about
So
people.
Nishamanan, that's okay. Nishamanan, that's okay. Let's hear him out.
Okay,
Let's hear
they
it.
care about people, and they are doing their best. And you see the number of people who have died in China. Absolutely nothing compared to the rest of the world because they have such a good sort of system to control. because they're not why they are second world best economy. Okay, so I mean, there's no point in bashing China talking about vaccine. Someone was just telling about myocarditis. He had no clue about myocarditis with mRNA vaccine because he
Okay,
hasn't
so
seen the
myocarditis is
data.
common side
He
effect of
hasn't
mRNA.
seen the data.
That's
How
okay.
many
That's okay.
myocarditis have you
Nisamanan,
heard
that's
about?
okay.
How many myocarditis have you heard about in people having vaccinations? That's not. There's absolutely nothing. In a million, two people get myocarditis. Okay, so there's no point in talking about rubbish data and bashing about China. Look after your country, look after your people, and do what is best for your country.
Our country, our people, isn't it? Coffee.
No, no, no. Your country
Just
from
once again.
coffee's
Just
perspective.
once again. Just once again. Just
I
once again.
think it's
You know.
Providian slip. It
So
just came out.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's okay. So a small question, coffee, right? You say that India was not prepared for the second wave, and a lot of things were hidden, etc., etc. And we should not be talking about vaccine efficacy. You're there still, coffee?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay. So my simple question is, right? If Chinese vaccine was working so effectively, why are they locking down entire city of Shanghai today?
Look, they are locking down. There's no one dying. Okay, there's no one dying in China because the life is so precious in China. They care about their people. You look at the numbers of people died. Okay,
Mhm.
okay. So India,
So,
what did they
Coffee,
Yeah,
do
you're
with the
coffee,
muted,
second
coffee.
so
wave?
Just one
just once
interjection.
again, guys, just one
When
again. If
when
anybody,
Andolanji,
just once
just
again,
one
Gamble,
short
8 seconds.
interjection. Coffee,
Gamble, once
if
again.
this COVID can be combated by locking the person, then what is the need of vaccine?
Yeah, lock
pardon?
down the entire China.
No, no. The lock.
You are
Do you know
creating
why
jokes.
because you don't know the
So
reason for
coffee,
lockdown.
you claimed,
It's not to prevent the virus.
you claimed that you're a doctor, right?
Yes. What is to say about that? Yeah.
No, I'm just asking. You're
Yeah. Yeah.
just reconfirming, right? So, what is the role of a vaccine?
I mean, I would tell you, coronavirus vaccine
No,
will
I asked a
accelerate.
simple
Let me
question, not
just tell you about
coronavirus
something. I don't
vaccine.
want to go to
No, coffee.
basics.
Hold on.
Okay.
No,
I
no,
don't want to
content.
go
No,
to.
no,
I'll tell you
coffee. No,
something.
no, but not everybody in this room is doctor, right? So
No. No.
we are
No.
just
No.
asking
No.
a simple question, right?
No. No.
Coffee. So
Let. No.
what
No.
is a
No.
vaccine supposed
Let.
to do? Coffee.
I
If you're
think.
not gonna engage, if you're
I
not gonna
think.
engage, if you're not gonna engage, then
Let
it
me.
is better let's not
No.
discuss.
No. Let
Right?
me
Answer my
tell
question.
you something.
You
Just
made
one
some
line.
huge claims. No, hold on.
Yes,
Coffee,
I'm
hold on.
talking about
You made
vaccine.
some. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm
So
talking
what
about
is the role of
vaccine.
what is the role of a vaccine?
Okay, the role after all this, after millions of vaccination all across the world, we know only one thing: coronavirus. I mean, vaccines has never prevented people from having coronavirus. It has only reduced the severity of the coronavirus infection.
Brilliant.
Okay, I know.
So
So Pakistan is okay in
I
not
know
having
hundreds of.
its people vaccinated. So Pakistan is okay in not having its people vaccinated. That's what you want to
Look,
say.
coronavirus vaccine is not
From
going
where did
to
you do MBBS?
completely
just
prevent
once
Coffee.
again,
From where did you?
having
Which institute?
what?
From which
coffee.
institute did you do MBBS?
Look, do you know something? Do you know about
Oh, I
TB
may not
vaccine?
be
The
knowing
oldest
something
TB
of
vaccine?
everything, but the thing is that these
Uh,
are basics. What you are talking,
okay.
you
Just
are
once again,
questioning
right?
the vaccination itself.
No,
So
none of
just
the
once again, coffee.
vaccines are
Hold
going to
on, hold on
completely
for 10
अरे
prevent.
seconds.
यार
Okay, so answer 8 seconds. मैंने coffee. Yeah, I've shut you out for a while. This is the kind of I won't call illogical claims, uninformed claims people have been making, and specifically people who don't have a clue. He may be an MBBS, but I think it is from a paid seat, right? He hasn't qualified in to be an MBBS, right? That's coming out to be quite evident. because he doesn't understand the role of a vaccine. In India, the data is very clear. The rate of hospitalization due to COVID had gone down to less than a percentage, which is almost equivalent to that of a normal influenza, this thing. The rate of ICU has gone down to less than 0.1%. The rate of deaths from corona has gone down to less than 0.001. People die more of typhoid today in India than from corona because our vaccines
I,
are effective.
Ansuranji, if allowed, I just have one small question for Coffee. That what is the minimum age that the vaccines are being given for the children out there in England? If you can just put a view over there of that. You said you claim that you are a part of the health system of British, the UK, so you must be knowing it. What is the minimum age the corona vaccine is being given to the children? Coffee, are you there?
No, that's okay. Let's not test people's
No, I am
ability.
Googling
not
maybe.
testing. He had made a statement that our whole medical field has given their life and tried to save the people of India. As someone coming and blotting out that okay, India did not handle corona vaccine, the corona pandemic in a nice way, in a grander way. I will not stand that. I will not stand that, and I will take offense. Because Ganji, if someone talks about when the Supreme Court or the lawyers, will you not be filled hurt about that? If someone random comes out and say and feel the whole
So that's
lawyers.
okay. Let's move on. Let's move on. We just understood his basic sense of knowledge about medicine. Even I know more, it seems. So any which ways, let's move forward. A lot of people are, putting this kind of, fake news information in chats also, right? That in India, 44 million people died, 50 million people died during the phase two, etc., etc. What I've done, if you can PTR and look at my DP, this is total number of deaths in India for the last, I think in my DP it is appearing for 7-8 years, right? From 2014 onwards. 2014 there were 93 lakhs, 2015 94, 2016 95, 2017 96, 2018 97, 2019 pandemic year 97, 99, sorry. 2020 1 crore. The same rate of death. Now, somebody will say that these numbers are faked by the government, and I would pity their little brains because these numbers are number of death certificates issued in India, which cannot be faked. As everybody sitting here who even knows 5% about India knows very well that when it comes to succession, when it comes to transfer of bank account, when it comes to transfer of property of a deceased, when it comes to getting pension or family pension of a deceased person, right? You need one thing that is very important, which is death certificate, without which you can't even move a step. If anybody is deceased in the family, the first thing you do is get death certificate. Now, the death certificate data, that means the total number of deaths in India, clearly indicate that there is no such number of 44 million, 54 million. Yeah, one can argue, right? That 99 lakhs people died in 2018, 97 lakhs, and in 2019, 99 lakh people died, right? 2 lakh more than 2018. Someone would also argue that, all these people who died, 99 lakhs, out of which 50% died of coronavirus. And I would also accept the argument, right? There are 450 people who die because of accidents in India. During 2019, those deaths would have been lesser. Not many people are aware every year 300,000 people die of typhoid in India, right? Those deaths would have been fewer. I agree. There would be, if government is claiming that there was 4,50,000 deaths in India, there could have been 7 lakh, 8 lakh, 9 lakhs, probably. But the death certificate data does not indicate even remotely that 40 million people or 50 million people or 100 million people died of corona. That's all fake. Here is the data for you on my DP.
Yeah, also Andolan, it's impossible in India to hide any deaths because all this data is collated at the state level. And the lot of states are opposition to BJP. So if you are accusing, the central government is hiding data, you will also have to accuse the state governments are also doing the same, which doesn't make
No,
any sense.
even let's say for a moment, all the state governments, all the municipal corporations in the country, and all the central government all go and hide this data. Can you imagine a single family who is having 20,000 rupees in his bank account of the deceased person, not going and asking for a death certificate to get that money moved out?
Yeah, Mr. Coffee, it's not China, my friend, to hide the
Yeah.
deaths in India. I mean, coming back to his assertions of China cares about his people, that is
It is quite visible.
boatload.
Yeah, 30 million people under lockdown. That's not the care we want. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a bizarre kind of cure, and also they killed 30 million in Cultural Revolution. They killed all the sparrows, and that led to the famine.
8-year famine. Yeah.
So these kind
But
of bizarre things.
we would not go down in history. The point is very simple, right? People who are saying that, China cares about its people. Coffee, your mic is open. Can you shut it? Because there's some disturbance coming. Okay. So a lot of people are, claiming XYZ about China, right? 3 years in COVID, right? India started with a lockdown. I agree, because at that particular point of time, we knew limited about COVID. And when there is no knowledge, the best option was lockdown. China also did a lockdown at that time. India did it. Australia did it. US did it for a while. But post-vaccine came in. Our policy in India with respect to COVID has changed drastically. We have vaccinated the entire population, at least the eligible one, 12 years and above. And frankly speaking, that data is reflecting in the hospital admission for COVID. It is quite clearly down by by 10,000. I mean, if there were 10 lakh people in hospital because of COVID a year back, today there are hardly 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people across the country in the hospital. Right, our policy has changed because we made an effective vaccine. We responded with a grand vaccination program. We responded with a decent medical, delivery to our citizens. And what is China doing? After 3 years into COVID, adopting the same policy it adopted 3 years back, imprisoning its own citizen in an entire city has been imprisoned. They are not allowed to step out of their residential apartment. Food supplies are not reaching. India is making sure that 800 million people are supplied with necessary food from the last 2 years. So in case if there is any hardship because of the pandemic and the earlier lockdown and slowdown of economic activity, people do not die. This is called caring about people. 30 million people locked down like prisoner. Only a fool will say that it is about caring about people. But with having said so, every person is entitled to his opinion. If Coffee believes that's the way, caring works, I wish wherever he is in any state of India or any other country in the world, his government shows him the due cares and locks him in his apartment. moving out. So Jay, you had to still Jay, you haven't made a point as yet, right? Please go ahead and complete.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, I agree. Look, calling the Chinese, caring, would mean that in the same case that the North Koreans are saints. Neither of these things are true. The Chinese have never shown a track record of caring. People are considered resources in the eyes of the Communist Party. Their vaccines are nonsense. In fact, even the most Chinese of the Chinese, what's his name, Manju, he himself claimed that when I said made the point that hey, your Sinopharm is garbage, he's like, yeah, well, you know what? No vaccine works. So when in the beginning they were like, oh look, we put out vaccines very quickly. Chinese party is very quick with with our medicine and blah blah blah. And then now their narrative has shifted to our vaccine doesn't work, so no one's vaccine works. Um, and so this is how it is. They changed the goalpost. Overall, so the context of the China is a real virus fake vaccine. Are we talking about like their vaccine? We're talking about Sinopharm. Is that right? Hello.
Yeah.
Yes,
Like
Jay.
the
Yes,
context
we
of
are talking about
yeah.
yeah. So China. So the vaccine made in China is fake, and the virus made was real.
The
So
virus was definitely a real deal. The precautions the Chinese took is nothing. I wouldn't call it something to be applauded. The fact of the matter is, no government was prepared for something like this, and surely not the place where it was ground zero for the virus itself. If you're telling me that they were already ready, that they did an excellent job, it's bullshit. China was ground zero for the COVID, and they didn't know how to handle it, and they still don't know how to handle it. They're causing massive, massive logistics problems and supply chain problems, which is going to ripple across the world because Shanghai is the busiest port in the world, and this is going to cause more starvation and death in other ways. Which the virus couldn't deliver. This definitely these shortages, supply shortages, are going to be felt across the world. There's even baby powder and all this stuff happening not just in the U.S. but other places. So yeah, China is causing a lot of deaths if you think about it. Whether it be from the virus or the vaccine is a different story, but they're surely killing off a lot of people.
so Jay, you mentioned Manju, but Manju's not there in this room, right?
Yeah, no, he had mentioned in a previous conversation. I had brought it up to him about Sinopharm. I'm like, well, looks like because they locked down Shanghai. So I told him, I'm like, well, it looks like your your vaccine didn't work clearly because why are they locking up cities then? And then he's like, well, our virus doesn't work, so no virus works. I mean, our vaccine doesn't work. Their virus works. Our vaccine doesn't work, so no vaccine works. And I'm like, okay, because that's not what he said when this all began. He was like very much like, oh, we have the best medicine, we have this and that. So that's what I mean. They keep shifting their goalposts.
Right, and what I fail to understand is the fake arrogance of a country, right? I can understand a lot of countries have not been able to make vaccines, but they have at least gone ahead and bought from others or requested from others, right? I can understand China is not a very rich country. If they would have requested India, I'm sure India would have obliged by providing them with some vaccines so that they could, instead of locking down. I mean, 20 million doses is not a big deal, right? Instead of locking down Shanghai, they can request India, and India on humanitarian basis, seeing the suffering of these 20-30 million people in Shanghai. I'm sure they'll be able to help them out with some vaccines, which are genuine vaccines made in India.
Andal, and to that point, there is just to give you an idea of how trusted our vaccines were compared to the Chinese vaccines. Actually, in the beginning, the Pakis had requested through back channels to the Modi government to send vaccines, Indian vaccines. And then even the Chinese were at the same time, the Chinese were voluntarily sending off their vaccines to Pakistan. Pakistan was more cautious about their quote unquote allies vaccine, and they were opting in to get Indian vaccines. Which is which tells you everything you need to know as far
Yeah.
as trust
You
war.
know why, Jay? Because Chinese sent underwears as face masks to Pakistan. That's why.
Well, they are a bunch of assholes, so it's worth covering up.
That was a good one.
No, you forgot about the
But no, no.
anal swabs which China was administering to its citizens.
Well, they're doing it caringly. Remember, caringly administering it.
No, I feel that underwears can work better than vaccine, as Coffee said.
But the main point here is that the Chinese have no credibility in the world. They can talk about their money, they can talk about everything else, but at the end of the day, when Pakistan doesn't trust you, well, they have all reason not to trust us. But if they have no, their own ally, good ally who writes billions of dollar checks to them, and they still don't trust them, that tells you everything you need to know about China. That no one is their friend, no one actually trusts them.
But Jay, we talked about money. I think Shanghai in China would have the one of the highest per capita income in China.
Yeah, it's one of their
Maybe, right? I mean,
top. Yeah.
it's a top city, right? And 30 million prisoners with high per capita income. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. There's many instances. I don't know. I don't understand why they believe they're the only ones on Earth, and I think they think we're some sort of spectators. We all live on the same planet. In the United States, they had lockdowns. They didn't have to, starve people to death, and they didn't have to do anal swabs. And we're an actual democracy. So I don't understand where China thinks it's doing better than real democracies, and I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not just
and
lockdown, right? We should call it well down because
yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
welding the
You know,
doors
Oh yeah, I
together.
forgot to mention that. Yeah, because
you know
that's
the worst
yeah.
thing, the worst thing about the second wave of the pandemic was that most of the US media outlets like the Guardian, Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the New York Post, they were all doing shit propaganda against India. They were actually exploiting the deaths, which is the moment of misery or sorrow for the innocent families of the victims, in order to gain popularity and boost their TRP and to create chaos around the world regarding the situation of India. And it was horrifying and it was horrible to see that the pick of cremations in India, COVID cremations in India, were sold at whooping $100. That's 7,000. That's 7,000 rupees. Imagine they were making business out of the deaths of the innocent victims of COVID. God will burn these people into hell. See, I would agree that Indian government to some extent did. Indian government to some extent was mismanaging the things and did not take and did not handle it at the right point of time. But when they handled it in a very good manner. However, I would say that whatever US media was doing was absolutely ridiculous. And after a few months, second wave when the second wave United arrived in United States, arrived in United States, it was like hell. Even states like Texas and Florida were running out of oxygen, and we were and there were in fact tents out tents outside the hospitals, in order to fulfill the in order to fulfill the shortage of beds. Now there were journalists who were trying to blame the government, who were launching abuses, personal abuses. I mean, such lewd abuses on the prime minister, praying for the death of the prime minister. And it was quite depressing to see that all such things were happening. It was not just a loss of life, but also a collateral emotional damage to those people who were not even who did it, who had nothing to do with COVID. I mean, even those people, because of COVID crisis, even those people who did not get COVID had to suffer because of it. And during the second wave, and it's my personal experience that in my family there were four members. Three of them had caught COVID, but I was the only one who did not catch COVID, and it was quite fortunate of me. Uh, but yes, I did suffer mentally, because you know because from inside I was feeling quite from inside I did face the panic of any of any unfavorable favorable situation that might arrive in my life. But I always pray to God that no such thing happens, and yes, the God made sure that everything goes in a smooth way, and everyone in my family recovered very well. But yes, that time was that period of time was very challenging for me. And yes, I would and whenever I read these news, I was just occupied with fury uh, and and not animosity against these media outlets, who instead of contributing towards uh, contributing towards uh, alleviating the crisis, were involved in further worsening of the crisis. Misinformation There were several rounds of misinformation and fake pics that were being circulated in the media to sensitize the situation in the country. The real shortage of oxygen was because of the hoarding of oxygen by some of the fraudsters, most of which were the members of the opposition political parties. These people, especially from the Aam Aadmi Party and
Yeah,
many others.
weird. Let's come
Yeah.
back to China, please.
Yeah,
So,
but
so
we
I
should
would.
realize that the situation of US in the second wave was even worse than that of India. India at its peak of the second wave
Veer,
reported 4.5 lakh cases, but
Veer,
United States reported
China,
millions.
Veer, China.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I mean, if we're talking on the concept of China caring, just imagine the delusion, right? After that first couple of waves and all that, immediately they threw a giant party in Wuhan, a giant party. A government which cared would not do that. Instead, they cared more about the optics to the world, to show to the world that somehow they solved the problem. The problem was now gone, and there's nothing more. They had a giant party right
So
where people had.
what is being happening in Shanghai is called after party, Jay?
Well, I wasn't invited, thank God.
Lucky you.
I just have to make one small point. There is a very famous philosopher of China whom the CCP follows, Hong Su. If someone read about China, he will know about it. He had once made a statement that is very popular in China. Sing Fu Jesu Zakizi Hanpi Si Zagono. According to this statement, it means happiness is only illusion. Product only counts. That means happiness of human is just you can look at it in a skeptical way that you can provide it or you can't. It is not a matter, but only thing that counts that the benefit you get from that human.
Was
That
it Sun
was
Tzu who said this?
Hong Su, the
Hang Tzu or
philosopher
Sun
Hong.
Tzu? Oh, Hang Tzu. Okay. Yeah, coming back to illusion, right? A lot of people talk about China being rich. That is again an illusion. You know why you don't see any poor people in big cities in China? Because poor people are not allowed to enter these cities. If you go to any city in any part of the world, you will see poor people. If you go to New York, you'll see homeless people. If you go to San Francisco, you will see poor people all around, homeless people and all those things. You'll go to Bangalore, Delhi, what have you. You'll see a lot of poor people. Why? Because people in other countries, normal countries, have mobility. If somebody is poor in a village, he can go to a city and live a very basic life and earn his living. In China, that is not possible. You need a permit to go from a village to a city. So they control who lives in a city. It's all very controlled. It's all, again, an illusion. So if you leave out the main cities and towns in China, rest of the China lives still is a third world country. No difference. There are a lot of videos. There is a video by two people. They run each of their own channel. One is Serpent Zade, another is Lava 87. They lived in China for 15 years. They are married to Chinese people. They moved to US now. They have traveled across China on their motorbikes and documented all these things. It's still a very poor country. Unlike in India, where we have all the food security program, healthcare program, all those things, China has none of it. They are left to fend for themselves, and only these big cities are spick and span, high rises, and all those things, because China controls who lives in that. So if any CCP shill comes here and says that, look, how China lifted its people from poverty, that's a complete lie. It has just created
So
some
what you are
markets.
effectively saying, San, is that people from Chinese villages would need a visa to go to Chinese cities?
Absolutely, yeah. And also, they have a social permit, a social behavior
Look,
system,
it's
something,
like
social credit system. According to that, if you misbehave, you will be barred from moving to big city. You will be barred from getting an education. That's why people in China are very afraid to speak. People outside China who have relatives in China are also afraid to speak about CCP, because if they come to know that somebody spoke against CCP, they will track down their relatives. They may put them in jail. Also, they may give a bad social security score that may debars themselves and their future progeny for 3 generations from getting an education or moving to a better town. So it's a lot of control going on in China. But these CCP shills have no idea what's going on in China, or they do, they just lie about it.
Yeah, but because most of the people who appear on the social media are
because
stooges of China, CCP.
Yeah,
Normal Chinese people are not allowed to come on social media. I mean, we should not forget this fact.
yeah, Andolan.
It is, thumb rule.
Even in US, there are instances of Chinese embassy people going to Chinese diaspora here and threatening them. If you speak against CCP, your relatives in China will have bad consequences. Imagine that.
Wow.
That's how much control they exercise.
No, but this is important for people to understand. Who are there on Clubhouse and Twitter and listen to few of those Chinese people who come and speak and give a lot of gyan on CCP doing amazing work. People need to remember only approved people can come on public social media from China, and they should not forget who approves them to come here on social media. This is CCP itself. There is a blanket restriction on normal Chinese to have account on Twitter, Clubhouse, Facebook, WhatsApp. They just don't have access to these applications in China. So when you see a Chinese guy sitting in Clubhouse making tall claims, the first question you need to ask them, how come you are appearing on a social media platform which is restricted in China? In all probabilities, they would be the propaganda machinery of CCP, because they will only allow people to come on global media platforms, social media platforms, the one who would talk positive about China.
Yeah, not
With
only that,
that, let me go
Andolan.
to, yeah.
Yeah, even if you're a Chinese person is living outside, they CCP exercises control over them by holding their relatives hostage. That's why people who are out of China, who still have relatives in China, are very careful about not to step on CCP stores.
Makes sense. So let's go to Miniji, and then we go to Vindik and Anupji and Sashwati. Miniji. Sorry, Ram, I forgot. Ram, over to you, then we'll go to Miniji. Miniji, sorry, we forgot Ram.
सर मिनी जी को बोलने दीजिए फिर मैं उनके बाद आ जाऊंगा
हाँ, पर मेरे ख्याल से मिनी जी का कुछ ग्लिच है, आवाज नहीं आ रही। मिनी जी एक बार आप एग्जिट करके एंटर करिए प्लीज, आपका माइक खुला हुआ है लेकिन आवाज नहीं आ रही।
चलिए जब तक सर मैं बोल लेता हूँ कि कॉफी भाई बोल रहे थे कि इन इंडिया वी सप्लाई फ्री राशन टू करोड़ people. Britain salute Yogi ji model. Free medicines as well as vaccine was given to people. Efficacy of Indian vaccine can't be challenged yet. So India's cumulative COVID-19 vaccine coverage crossed more than 100 crore doses, whereas China arrested a leader for selling fake vaccine, which was faked in China. They smuggled Indian vaccine and sold it in 35,000 INR. Their PPE kit was returned because and other kits
Ram, can you
also.
repeat the point you just made? They smuggled Indian vaccine and sold it as Chinese?
Yes, in 35,000 INR rupees. And another thing is their PPE kit was returned with other kits because they are not up to standard. We all know how they smuggled underwear mask to Pakistan to mock them, whereas Bharat become #1 mask exporter. I'm proud of that. We did great in ventilators making. I saw videos of line of thousands of people outside hospital in China. However, India managed it properly. Thanks a lot and hats off to our health warriors. Sir, meanwhile in China these days, they are begging World Pharmaceutical to invest and buy their products through digital partnering platform. You can go and Google it. What they are doing, they are literally begging to the international pharma to come and invest in their regional and their companies. I don't know of which China Coffee ji was talking about. Andoji, I shared two videos which is showing riots in China because people are starving there, and second is clashes in Shanghai. Can you please ping them so that other can also see, and also Coffee ji?
And just Ram, just a slight correction. You said India has administered 100 crore. In fact, India has administered almost 200 crore doses of
Sir, I
vaccines.
said more than 100 crore. Sorry,
Right. So
sorry for that.
200. You should say 200.
Great, sir. So thank you for updating.
Yeah, also talking about transparency, right? Remember what they did to the doctor who first raised alarm about this strange disease, strange virus? I think his name is Dr. Lee. First, they made him apologize for spreading quote unquote disinformation. Then they put him in house arrest. Then finally, he allegedly died of COVID. So basically, they killed him. They made him apologize and then they killed him for exposing, sounding the alarm that there is some strange virus going around, cautioning people to take precautions. That's how much care these CCP people have for their own people. Yeah, he was trying to save lives, but
Somebody back channeled me saying that the Chinese will hack your phone. So let me remind, if there is any such attempts, I'm not using a Chinese phone which is prone to hacking. I'm using a Korean phone made outside China. So it's difficult to hack it. But let's go to Miniji. But Ram, you made a very serious allegation, right? That Chinese are smuggling Indian vaccines and selling it in open market. Do you have any media report or something which suggests this, or where did you find this information?
Unfortunately, I don't have that right now, but I can provide it definitely. I saw it in news, and that is very. I can trust him. Yes, I can provide it.
yeah, Ram, can you elaborate a bit? Where did they buy the vaccine? They bought it from India, or they bought it from other countries where India sent their vaccines to, then smuggled
They
it to
don't have
China?
that proper source from where they smuggle it, but yes, they did smuggled it and sold it in China.
Oh,
Oh, okay. So for rich people in China, they are putting in Indian vaccines by smuggling it. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
yeah, maybe the rich Chinese themselves got it smuggled because they don't trust Chinese vaccine, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, that is a possibility. I'm willing to accept that. But let us go to Miniji. Miniji, sorry, we have been kept you waiting for so long. Please go ahead. But you're still not audible,
I
Miniji.
hope Miniji's phone is not hacked by Chinese.
Hope, Miniji, you are not using a Chinese phone. It is prone to hacking.
Also, after the PTR is complete, can I also speak? Because I think when my turn was called, I was driving, so I couldn't respond at that. Or I was a little
You
off
can go
topic.
now, Karan. Miniji, you can exit and come back. Let's try that out. By the time Jay, you can make your points.
So I just unfortunately, some of the people who made points earlier are not around anymore. Somebody was um, explaining his conspiracy about why China released this virus. Um, Really, it's not a conspiracy. It's plain and simple. It's realpolitik. If you look at um, China's trade surplus, U.S. is actually the source of the vast majority of China's trade surplus, and the U.S. has been China's cash cow for the last few decades. uh, Donald Trump was threatening to destroy that cash cow. He was threatening to end the trade surplus. And so, plain and simple, this pandemic was um an attempt to a successful attempt to uh, ensure that China's cash cow stays intact. Their China's party, meaning the Democrat Party, will be reinstated, and we can continue as business as usual. While $600 billion a year is sucked out of the American economy and used to uh, make China continue making China wealthy. So that was really plain and simple. That's what happened, why this pandemic started. And it was essentially a regime change operation in America. All that being said, um, as far as the Indian vaccines go, um, we've had people like Sanjeev Batra, very notorious on Clubhouse. During the height of the pandemic last year, he was going around room to room saying that this Covaxin is a BJP vaccine, and it's not proven by science, and we should be importing Pfizer and Moderna. Um, and the BJP is doing a grave injustice to the people. Um, and he literally questioned the credibility of our scientific institutions, saying this is a fraudulent vaccine. It's a political vaccine. And all at the end of the day, these attempts to foment vaccine hesitancy failed. Like was just mentioned, uh, India administered about 200 crore vaccines, uh, the most successful vaccine administration program in the world. Yes, China administered more, but you have to understand that they were injecting people with poison, not vaccines. Um, One second. I was passing through an underpass, so my signal would have lagged. But basically, um, Latin American countries, they did their own localized testing of Sinovac, Sinopharm, and all of them had to massively downgrade the efficacy rates because they were so ineffective. The Chilean health ministry, in fact, I think they gave us Sinovac a 3% efficacy after one dose. Um, you'd rather inject pig manure and have a higher efficacy than what Sinovac gives you. Um, Country like China, I think that the vaccines are kind of reflective of China as a whole. Yes, administering 3 billion vaccines at a rapid rate, what an achievement, right? You look at any Chinese city today, look at the skyscrapers they have, the skylines, the infrastructure. I'm not saying it's all bad, but at the end of the day, um, it's highly questionable, the quality of their construction, the quality of their high speed rail. India is literally paying far more for Japanese high speed rail than China, because at the end of the day, there's no reliability when it comes to Chinese technology. There's no safety. Um, the value of human life in China, it doesn't exist. Humans are basically disposable. And we do have people shills for the CCP. sponsored by the CCP. We all know who they are. I think somebody mentioned an Andy guy earlier. I'm not too familiar, but we have another guy from Hong Kong as well, and they're always talking about how great China is and how perfect China is. Um, but beyond all this uh, glitzy facade, there's a very dirty underbelly to China, and there's very nasty things. There's a lot of poverty in China. China is not as yes, there's a lot of wealth in China, but there's also extreme poverty. A huge problem. People literally dig oil out of sewage, and they use that for the street food. And this is rampant throughout China. This is a major societal problem. That's a problem that's unique only to
Can you
China.
repeat the last point?
So what happens is these street food vendors, they pour their oil into like the nala, into the sewage, and there's actually a massive industry in China where people collect this cooking oil from the sewage system, and then they reuse it at the street food halls, the street food vendors, even restaurants. They reuse the oil that they've collected from the sewage. Um, the way China operates, it's always about cost cutting. It's about saving each and every penny. um so
Hope the Chinese food joints in India are not following suit to keep the authenticity same, right? Because I eat a lot of Chinese food.
or anywhere in the world for that matter. The Chinese restaurants are all around the world. I hope they don't follow the same practice here.
so at the end of the day, I think we had Coffee, who I believe from his profile it appears he was in the UK. um and he was spreading all kinds of propaganda. But I wanted to ask him about the moment he took the Hippocratic oath, which is something every doctor has to pledge, that every doctor has to make, that they are committed to saving lives. And based on that oath he has taken, he should be very thankful to the BJP. Millions of lives were actually saved because of BJP's policies. Now, don't get me wrong, I am I'm very objective, I'm very critical, and criticize the BJP when they need to be. But the way they handled this pandemic, I mean, this was a case study for the world to follow. This is literally a template that every country should follow in case of any future pandemic. They've really shown the world how to handle a pandemic and how to minimize human loss and casualties. And applause to Indian scientists producing the best vaccines in the world. Bharat Biotech inactivated vaccine. Even the Covishield, although it was a British vaccine, but generally the adenovirus vaccines are at least have been effective in combating COVID, and they have worked in India. They've been administered on a large scale, and COVID has been virtually eliminated from the country. Um, that being said, yes, the mRNA vaccines, they were extremely filled with side effects. I think more than 50% of people who took Moderna reported mild to severe side effects. Um, and as we have seen, throughout the vast majority of this pandemic, I know room is about China, but in the US, since 2020, consistently we've seen 3,000 to 4,000 deaths a day. And so that's a litmus test for these mRNA vaccines, and show you how effective they really are. That's all I had to say. I'm sorry, I jumped a little
Yeah,
from point to point,
no worries,
but
Karan. Yeah, thank you for bringing that sewage oil thing. I came to know this by watching couple of YouTubers who lived in China. I was horrified. Imagine, you take your family to a place where they use this sewage oil to cook dinner. That's horrible. Andolan, I sent you a link in the back channel that explains the visa system in China, where people are
Yeah,
required
you
to.
put it on a chat, right? Somebody was questioning the authenticity and you put the information. I'll put it up.
Yeah. So that's called hukou system. It lasts for generation. If somebody has to move from a village to a city, it takes at least 1 or 2 generations for them to make that move. So most of the rural area is still a third world. Don't get dazzled by this handful of shiny cities. That's just an illusion. Wealth in China is an illusion. Like somebody else said on the platform, they treat their people as resources, not as people.
My next.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We have the Vindik is there, and then Anup. So let's check with Vindik if he wants to speak. He can go first, and then we can
Namaste everyone. Thank you, Andalanji. Hello, Neeraj. Hello, Sanji. um, so not to digress from the topic, but I actually don't want to talk about China. I want to talk about CCP because I think that's where our focus should be. I think when we name the problem as China, we open ourselves up to a lot of speculation about Asian hate and so on. I have got nothing against the people. So let me focus on the actual virus here, which is the CCP.
yeah.
So I'm going
Which
to
is
talk
true,
about it.
Vindik, because just to small clarification, this is the point you raised. We are also, we opened this room because of the concern of the Chinese people. And, one of the largest humanitarian crises which is currently going on in this world is lockdown or taking away prisoners of 20 to 30 million citizens of Shanghai, taking away their basic freedom, not giving them access to food and basic amenities. And this is the reason of concern. So we're definitely this room. Nobody who has till now been on the speaker panel
Yeah.
has shown any they have all shown concerns towards people of China, but yes, definitely there are policy matters of CCP which we have been critical about. So
Totally. And I mean, I not even for a second did I doubt that, but just wanted to make it clear for the audience, if that makes sense. Because there will be a lot of people who will want to have a chance at that. But anyway, let me talk about the CCP because I think the people and a nation are much larger than the party that rules that particular nation. About CCP, my read is this: CCP has not been good for the world, but guess what? It has not been great for China either. We are forced to ask the question about development at what cost? If you were given a choice to have more money in your pocket at the cost of several restrictions on even naming your children a certain way, using social media and not using certain social media, live in a certain specified way, or risk the cost of several other things, would you really want that life? It's pretty much like the case of a Dalit who converts to Islam or Christianity under the dream that they will finally break the shackles of caste, only to realize that now they're actually being discriminated against as a Dalit Muslim or a Dalit Christian by Muslims and Christians in their own community. So the situation actually hasn't changed a lot. Like Sanji mentioned, although development has happened, there are still hierarchies within China that restrict you from movement, and like there are so many other cases as well, right? So at what cost? China has managed to show great external progress to the world, but it hasn't been holistic. The minorities are being slowly and steadily washed away with the state-sponsored forced migration of Han Chinese people, which the CCP actually considers as the true Chinese. So for all the hue and cry about nationalistic governments sweeping India and so many other nations, about being pure blood, about being Hindutva and so on, so much for the Chinese Communist Party that basically hails one particular type of Chinese as the true Chinese people, the Han Chinese. Today's China is a far cry from the China of the past. In fact, most of the positive things about China we talk about today, like the food, the culture, the music, are not a gift of the CCP. They actually have their origins in the Oriental China, which, along with India, was the fount of civilization and dharmic systems. And CCP has managed to kill the faith based systems and religion in that country. So we really need to look at CCP through that lens. How come a party has actually hijacked an entire set of people and civilization, managed to kill religion and faith from where it actually originated, and just standardize literally everything else that we know about? This is the nature of the left. This is the nature of Marxism, which is nothing but just a religionless religion. Abramized religion. CCP is a threat to Buddhism in Tibet. CCP has sold the PPE kits that were given to CCP as a gift by other countries when it was facing the COVID wave. So it really shows the true character of CCP. But to close, let me talk about the character of a few people on Clubhouse who I will not name because I think this room is not meant for that. It's bad enough of someone who cannot actually read facts and takes a wrong position, right? For example, there were people who spoke about CAA, and that's understandable. That's bad. You can actually, engage with those people. But it's actually diabolical of someone who can read facts, who sets up rooms on India, speaking at length about what's right and wrong about India while sitting in Hong Kong, uh, claiming to know so much, and they do actually know so much, uh, while not even remaining silent on China, speaking in all glory about the great CCP. It's actually diabolical of someone. You would expect, you would not expect an argument from someone who cannot read facts, but it's diabolical of someone. And look at the travesty that someone actually has the mind to process information, to get facts right, to understand and process, and still then support CCP is such a big thing. So just to close this, my real target is those people. I really doubt where their loyalties lie and how they sleep at night.
Yeah, thank you, Vindik. Again, thank you for making that separation between the people and the CCP. We only have love and respect towards Chinese people, but again, CCP is a different ballgame, different animal. The main victims of CCP are Chinese people themselves. If you already don't know, this month is the anniversary of Tiananmen Square massacre. Maybe I'll do a room on that later, today, maybe tomorrow. But again, just remember, this is not about the reflection on Chinese people. This is about CCP. CCP as a country and an army and social media trolls, which basically do their bidding. I mean, I don't know how many of you know, a Chinese army, the People's Republic of China's army, swears its allegiance to not to the country but to the party CCP. So it's a not a normal country. It's a country occupied by CCP. That's what I would say.
Can I quickly comment on that, Sam? That's
Yeah,
cool.
go ahead, Shay.
Yeah, so I actually, I mean, I understand the distinctions that certain people want to make, but I'm just making this statement for myself when I say this, okay? I don't want anybody else to be blamed or just because somebody's, sharing the panel. What I feel is, yeah, go ahead, make that distinction. Oh, it's the CCP, not the Chinese people. But the fact is, the CCP is made up of the Chinese people. The people who support the CCP are also Chinese. I'm not blaming everybody. But if you were to take that logic, then the Germans would have never paid war reparations after the World War II. The same argument could have been made where you can say, oh, no, that was just the Nazis, man. Why are you making the German people pay taxes for decades after the World War ended? That's not how things work. You got to hold people accountable. If you keep making these distinctions, they're going to use those distinctions and they're not going to let you be effective. That's just my perspective, and most people disagree with me. I don't really care, but that's just what I feel. There's no point in making those distinctions. You want to come across as like, they won't make those distinctions. Imagine if this came out of India. You think they would have made a distinction between the Indian government and Indians walking around? Imagine how ridiculous. Of course
No,
not.
Shay, there is a difference, right? Indian people elect Indian government, but Chinese people do
Yeah,
not
but they're
elect Chinese
tolerating
government.
that regime, Sam. That's what I'm trying to say, right? They're tolerating.
Yeah, I mean, some of them may support, but there are a lot more people who hate CCP. So that's what I'm,
I
standing
mean,
up
there's
for.
no stats for that, is there? Like, do you actually know that more people support
Yeah,
don't like the
yeah,
and
sure.
that they?
So this is an extrapolation maybe, but when we look at areas which are under the scrutiny of global media, like say Taiwan and Hong Kong, we find that data that while the origination of the people are the same, in Taiwan it is mostly 95% people are Han Chinese. Hong Kong also consists hugely of Han Chinese people, and despite of that fact, 60 to 70% of those people, and probably more, are opposed to CCP. So you can safely extrapolate that number to mainland as well.
I mean, that's from Taiwan and Hong Kong, you said, or did
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, but Taiwan and Hong Kong, I mean, it's expected trend, right? It's an expected trend where obviously people would be more against the CCP
No, Shai,
than they would support the.
so the question you need to ask is, uh, everywhere there is a media scrutiny or open media available, you will find that 60, 70% and even more number of people are opposition to CCP. Why do you think the position would be different in mainland? Had it been different, the Chinese media would have, or the Chinese government or CCP would have opened its media and invited people. Since 80% of people are happy with us, but they don't do it. So the situation is absolutely same or probably worse for CCP in mainland China than it is in Taiwan and Hong Kong. They're just covering it up.
So I mean, I get what you're saying, Andolan, but the only place I disagree is I completely agree. Like in places like the Uyghurs, like the Xinjiang, I've seen like documentaries where there's complete absolute control to the point where you're only allowed to interact with certain people who only speak really nicely about the CCP. So in regions like that, yes, I do agree that there's a control and there's like sort of like a screen where you can't really see, you know, how many people are actually rebelling or revolting against the regime. But it's geographic specific, right? If you go to Xinjiang or Tibet or Taiwan or, you know, any of these places, then yes, I agree. But it's relatively like lower, I feel like, in other places, just because they know that most people, maybe I don't know, maybe that's not how it is,
We
but
don't
that's
know. The better answer is we don't know shit.
no, yeah. So we can't really say that most people are against them either, right? That's the limited point I'm trying to make. That's just something that we want
Point
to
taken.
believe is true.
Point taken, Shiv, but at the same time, had that not been the case, the media would have been opened up. They would have
Society
invited people, come
kind of
see, look
open,
at
right? Their
us.
society is still kind of open in the sense you can still go to Beijing, interact with locals over there, you know, but that's not the same in somewhere like Xinjiang. That's
So you are aware about this motorcycle team which went to all parts of China, right? The amount of resistance that they face to enter certain areas in China. Can any foreigner face us beyond the realms of these 2 or 3 or 4 cities?
I mean, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. It's specific, right? It depends on where, but yeah, I guess we could. I don't know. I agree with most, obviously, what y'all are saying, but that's just my domain where I disagree. But
Fair enough. So let's take Anup and then we conclude the room. Anup, you have been denied the opportunity to share your thoughts. Please go ahead and take as much time as you deem fit.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just driving right now. So, yeah, I think Vindic made some really interesting points. I really like how he spoke on the issue. It's a very, what China has done over the last 40 years, specifically the last 20, it is quite spectacular. Um, and you have to give credit where credit is due, from my view, that, they liberalized. They forged the relationships with the U.S. They took the U.S. manufacturing. By the way, the U.S. manufacturing is sitting in China. The U.S. economy, the core, the soul of the U.S. economy, is sitting in China. That is the reason why China has experienced this prosperity over the last 20 years. Is nothing else. But and I've lived in China about 20 years ago, just for 4 months, but enough to kind of see what they were doing and what drives them psychologically is really interesting. It is really a lot of sense of jealousy, a sense of um desperation, a sense of uh, reputation that makes them do what they do. They're not looking to contribute to the world as a first world power, like basically the U.S. has done. They're not looking to offer something. They're looking to extract. They are value extractors. They're not value contributors. And this is something where it's very different. So they claim they're a tier one first world power, blah 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 blah, but they don't think like that. They actually think like a developing nation that is desperate for resources, and that's at their core, that's what they are, because half their population has not benefited from the economic boom. So you got 1.5 billion people, 750 million of them have not benefited from the economic boom, which is why there's all this disparity that we're talking about. That being said, they have accomplished a lot of amazing things. And I'm not saying India needs to do similar things. India needs to grow its own way, there's no doubt. It doesn't have to look to China in terms of the model for growth. But there's a lot of work ahead for India. And I think, in order to move at the sort of pace that China did, economic reforms need to happen. They need to happen a lot faster, and investment in infrastructure has to be the focus. But coming back to Clubhouse, we've known for 2 years now that there are trolls, and they're not just in the Indian rooms; they're all over. They're in the U.S. rooms, they're in the European rooms. If you go into those, China has been doing this for a long, long time, and it's something that I try to counter leverage. I try to figure out what's happening there, but it's something that they're paying these guys, and they're not just Chinese guys, as people have obviously noticed. They're paying all sorts of people to do this. I know Palestinians, I know Indians, I know others that are under the employ. It's very obvious at the CCP. So we need to be very cognizant of this fact, of this reality. One of the things that I will mention is it is very important when we come on these public forums that we not show any division here within our own community, within Bharat. It is really crucial because those sorts of guys will leverage that, and they will use it and abuse it, and they will try to gain some sort of strategic advantage in some corridor or another at some point or another, either now or in the future. So, we need to show a lot of unity here. It's not something where, we can have. It's not a forum. Clubhouse is not a forum where we can have open family style discussions. This is an international app, right? So we need to be very cognizant, very aware of what we say, specifically about any domestic issue within India. But I agree with I think San and others who said that China's economy is not real. China has copied the U.S. They don't have a real economy. They don't have real innovation. They've never had real innovation. They have gotten rich the same way every communist government in history has gotten rich. The Russians, the USSR did the same thing. It's called screwing the peasant class and making them work in factories, making them work day and night, and extracting your labor. They did it to such an art and to such an extent that they caught up to the U.S. GDP in 20 years, which is actually incredible. Yeah. So, anyways, I'll just stop there. A lot of great points have already been made by fellow speakers, and it's an interesting topic. And we should continue to do rooms like this, Andolan. I think you're doing a great job that really bring to light a lot of the fake news and the propaganda and things like that. And I ultimately, once things settle down within the next few years, there will be a backlash against China from the world because of COVID. It will be substantial, it will be economic, and there will be retribution.
Yeah, thank you, Anup. Great points. Yeah, I completely concur when you say we should be cognizant what we speak on this app, especially about our domestic differences or different within the community, right? There are videos in Mandarin put out by CCP for their own people. There are lecturers, Chinese professors, studying the other countries like India and US and explaining to their students how to exploit the fault lines. These, we don't come across this because we don't understand the language, but there is a couple of initiatives. There are a couple of initiatives. One is the Great Translation Movement. You can go to their Twitter handle. It's just type in the Great Translation Movement. They translate also a lot of these documents and also these videos to English. you will get an insight into what they think about others. It's not pretty. I mean, they don't consider others as equal, and they always are looking to exploit the fault lines. When it comes to India, they know all about caste system. These professors, and I mean, most of their information is wrong. For example, they still believe that, at least one video I saw, the professor was saying that in India, certain people or certain castes are will not be able to do certain kind of work and all those things. There is nothing of that nature in India, but again, he is just uh, going by the wrong information. But the whole point is they are studying the outside world. They're trying to exploit the fault lines. And also, when it comes to India, they were explaining in that video. The professor was explaining the people of the Northeast look like Chinese. We should tell them that they're not Indian, they're Chinese. That's how we can exploit them. So they're already working on it. Maybe they're working on it for decades. That has come out now,
for
thanks to this.
decades.
Yeah, that has come out now thanks to
So,
the great translation
but
project.
the strange point, Sam, is despite of knowing all of this, why are our people getting repeatedly fooled?
Yeah, maybe all of them don't know. Maybe they're emotionally, vulnerable. I don't know. Andolan, my guess is as good as yours. But again, all we can do is spread awareness,
No, but
and
isn't that
we should
about
do
vanity
rooms of
politics?
this nature.
I just want to make few points out there about when they ask you about your caste system in India, just ask them about the Hukau or the Huji system that has the difference of Saman, the Haran, then there is the Nanrin, then how the Manchus are being killed by the Hun tribes, and the Huns are being killed by those the Ghanaian tribes. Then the Mongols are being just slapped out. Just ask them this all things about when the Chinese people try to ask you about your caste system, because very few people know that Semu or the Hanren are not allowed into the big organization. They are not allowed to hold the MD post or some big post in China. They are thought to be the caste that rise at the top, at the bottom end. So they are not allowed. Just ask them about
Yeah,
this whole thing.
yeah, Mr. Mon, it's a great point.
See
Yes,
what's
the
happening.
point is
See what's happening.
just I can I finish? Thank you. Yeah, the great points. Yeah, the problem is none of us know this. Very few people know this. We should run rooms of this nature. Please
Yeah,
work
I
with
think
me,
next
work
room
with us.
should be on this.
Yeah, work with us. You looks like you know a lot. Let's put rooms and educate our people. That's how we can
I
conquer.
don't know it. The best person in Clubhouse to speak about is Huju or Gamraj. Is the best person
Yeah,
on the floor to learn.
let's get these people together. Let's start doing rooms on this topic, right? We should focus our gaze on others as well.
Yeah,
Identify their fault lines. Get to know their fault lines.
See, the whole point is that uh,
do a
whether
room on system.
whether we think, yeah, sorry, Andolji, please go ahead. I'll speak after you.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. I was just proposing that we should have a room on caste system in Chinese society.
Yeah. So my point is that whether it is we think about Chinese in Northeast India or whether we think about Pakistan in Northwest India, the common thing between both of these people is that they will wipe out all plurality, all diversity in both these places. What is China doing in Tibet? China is replacing local Tibetan culture with Han culture. In 50 years, there will be no more Tibetan culture, or whatever there will be. It will be some Han um, lamas there, not Tibetan lamas. Tibetan culture will be wiped out, and I hope that India, Sikkim, Bhutan, Arunachal, they understand this, and that's what I hope
Oh,
that.
there's no problem there.
सर क्या होगा कि अगर इनको ये चाहिए कि होमोजेनिटी हो जाए इनको, और and I have known some Manipuri people. I have not had multiple interactions across the inter northeast, but I've known Manipuri people in person. And Manipuris are personally proud. Even if they're Christians, even if they have Christian first names, they have Hindu surnames. They keep their Sharmas, they keep their Pandits in their surnames, and they're proud of it. And they actually practice those cultural practices. So, sir, my only hope is that these people are self-aware in Northeast and in Northeast and Northwest. And let me also remind, this is my closing statement, my last sentence, is that RSS has actually been doing this, has actually been helping raise their own native cultural awareness in the Northeast. कि जैसे अपने मिशनरी जाते हैं नॉर्थ ईस्ट, मिशनरी जाते हैं वहाँ पर, वो उनको क्रिश्चियनिटी में कन्वर्ट करते हैं. When sets up their shakhas in the northeast, they encourage people to stick their ground, to stay to their ground and stay true to their culture. Right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be
Let's get back to China. Yeah, it's all good points. Black, you wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
I just kind of wanted to reiterate the point that you were making, Sam, that the Chinese are studying the fault lines of India, and they're definitely studying the caste system. I don't know uh, how knowledgeable they are completely at a broader scale, but they're studying it deeply. And just a personal anecdote: one of my coworkers, who's a Chinese national, we were having a conversation the other day, and he brought up something that I'd never personally heard of. And he brought this angle. He said that when it comes to the Indian foreign workers in America, a lot of the H-1B folks, he says they are coming from all castes, and he says that the reason for that is because according to the caste system, tech work doesn't fall into any of the particular categories of what is supposed to be work related to a particular caste. So the fact that it doesn't fall into any of the categories, all castes are allowed to be tech workers, and that's the reason why we don't see that. That's the reason why we see like all castes of folks coming to America, And of course, I didn't agree with them, and I have my counterpoints. But the broader point I'm trying to make here is that these guys are analyzing to that extent of what's happening, and something we wouldn't even think about, but these guys are thinking about these things. Yeah, I'm just speaking.
Yeah, I think that they don't need to have an understanding of caste, right? I mean, it's just like the Pakis. When they talk about caste, they don't care what it actually is. For them, they want to just spread rumors and they want to redefine what it is. So they want to be in charge of our caste system.
Well, pockets are something else, but these Chinese actually study stuff, right? They go deep into it, and it's about these things. That the reason why everybody's coming in America, regardless of caste, to work in tech, is because the caste system allows it. Because there's tech. The tech industry doesn't fall into any of the varnas for a particular caste. Like a Brahmin could be a tech person, anybody else, Dalit could be a tech person, so on and so forth. And
Yeah,
these are
Black.
things we wouldn't even think about, but these guys are thinking about these things, right?
Yeah,
The Chinese national.
it's very interesting that your colleague also said that. This is same information, same talking points. I mentioned earlier about a video about a Chinese professor in a Chinese university, that this lecture is in Mandarin. The Great Translation Project has taken it and put English subtitles to it. It's exact same thing. In India, there are certain castes can only do certain things. That's why they're backward and all those things. Probably you watched the same video or got the same memo, your colleague.
So does that mean that the Chinese come to the U.S. for just to copy? Because they're basically being stereotypical. They're trying to suggest that give it a reason. America's doors is open to everybody, including the Chinese, indiscriminately. So they can't just make a stupid assumption or make a claim like that. That the only reason we're coming to the U.S. or whatever, or getting into tech is because of
Jay, you're
caste.
cutting out for me. I don't know if you're cutting out for other people.
No, I can hear it.
Yeah, no, I mean, anyways, I mean, yeah, they're going to analyze things. They can study us all they want, but at the end of the day, They really need to pay attention within their own borders because last I checked, things are crumbling.
The thing is, we don't talk, whenever we talk to them, we don't ask them about the social credit system. If you read about the social credit system, the whole Chinese, the CCP has a credit system. Once you talk about the government, your rating will be put down, and that can be seen through. Means you will find that there are the credit ratings out there, and once your ratings have been put down, you are not allowed to do any business in China.
So we actually did
That
challenge a few of these Chinamen on that topic of social credit. You know what their response
um,
was? That it doesn't exist at all. They didn't
they
even
will say
acknowledge it. So
Jay, just
Even if
ask them why.
I mean, of
even if
course, they're not going to
see
acknowledge it
see the thing
because
is
they
like
don't want to
even
lose their social
so
credit.
Jay, even if it does exist, it's not a breaking force, right? It exists for everybody in China. It's not like it only exists for a certain sect of people within China. So it's a broader Chinese mechanism, and a lot of the Chinese are
No,
okay with
no,
that.
black. There is a difference. We don't have the understanding. This social credit system was the reason that Jack Ma and Ma Haoteng, these two persons were disbanded, and their companies, their shares has been put down.
Right, but what I'm saying is it exists for all Chinese people. It doesn't exist for a particular
Yeah,
branch of
No,
Chinese
no, no,
people,
yeah.
Black.
right?
No, no. What I was saying was that when I brought up social credit, right, the Chinaman's response was saying that it doesn't exist at all. He was basically saying you guys are making it up. It doesn't exist. And I'm just like, okay, that's pretty much
No,
how are you gonna have a country with so many cameras and so much AI face recognition and all of this stuff, literally set up for social credit, and then they're like, oh, it doesn't exist. So I mean, this was coming from Manju. This was coming from. They said it was basically a conspiracy. I'm like, what? These guys are delusional.
Yeah, Jay, your next question should have been then why has Jack Ma's company, which had all the tax and everything has been tax have been fulfilled and everything was there, why his companies was charged? Because if you remember, before he was being charged with those, he had made some comments against the CCP. That was the reason that his social credit went down, and
But
for
this is how they're going
reverting.
So
to
I
say
mean,
it, right? They're,
I guess the point I'm trying to drive home here is that the social credit score is not nearly uh, a breaking force to the same extent a caste system is to the Indian society, right? Even if it does exist, it's not going to break the Chinese society, their social norms. But the caste system is a fault line for India. If yeah, if our
I,
goal is like a united Hindu
break.
India.
Yeah, the only way you could break the Chinese is really you're not trying to break the people at all. The people are also prisoners in their own country. You're really trying to get rid of the CCP. All loyalty, all everything, every decision has to be in the benefit of the party. They don't give a shit about a person. So not really the fault lines of the country. You just have to see the fault lines within the CCP to start to unravel it.
Go ahead, guys. Open mic. I think we've been here for a long time. The purpose of this room is achieved, unless anybody wants to come up and speak, or we can go for the last comments.
Well, my last comment is they're delusional. I think we're going to see a lot more countries are going to start to walk away from them. They'll take their money. Don't get me wrong, but they'll still walk away. There's no loyalty to the CCP, no loyalty to the Chinese, to China. Tons of countries who are in debt traps and all these things. Things are going to change. And when the Chinese are on their knees, they need everyone's help, and they want to, fall back on their quote unquote allies. No one's going to be there for them. And even if people are going to be there, what are they going to do? They're all debtors. They're not, they're not capable of helping in any way. So, yeah.
Welcome, Parth. Go ahead.
Hi guys, sorry I've been busy last couple of days. Can you hear me right? I'm actually outside, so there may be some noise. Can you hear me right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so I just stick to the topic. I've shared this in so many other rooms, and soon I'm going to have an important person who is working in an institute in the US to come and speak about how this whole thing unfolded, the pandemic, and how several global institutions failed to, stem the rot right from the beginning, including the World Health Organization. And I've actually back channeled San an article which, if you can pin, it will be useful for people to read. So, real virus, fake vaccine. Yeah, the virus is absolutely fake vaccine. I had a room a couple of months ago in which a lady from Houston, she along with Dr. Peter Hotez, they developed this recombinant DNA vaccine, which is now been given. It's a patent-free vaccine which has now been given to India. India is now manufacturing this vaccine at 3 million doses a month. She came into the room and then she talked about the vaccine efficacy of different vaccines. The Sinovac efficacy is less than 50%, and that says a lot. On the other hand, every other vaccine, including Sputnik, they have at least 60% efficacy. India's vaccine, Covaxin or the recent Covovax, they all have 70 to 75% plus efficacy. It says a lot about the vaccine efficacy made in China. And the efficacy of the vaccine made in China is representative of the overall quality of products that they come up with. And one shudders to think what would happen to the world if this regime takes control of. They are already in control of the global chain, which is being changed slowly, not at the rapid pace that we would want the control to change hands. And one can imagine what will happen to the entire world if it comes under the total control of a regime that cannot even let its scientists work under proper conditions that led to the outbreak, lab leak, which eventually resulted in the pandemic. And on top of that, not only was a lab leak allowed to happen in terrible conditions, miserable conditions, they kept it, tried to keep it hush hush, leading to the virus spreading. I mean, it would have eventually spread even if they had announced, but that's a different story, right? The intent matters. They had a malicious intent of protecting themselves. They thought, just like how it happened in 2002, 2003, if the world came to know about this virus, initially on, it might affect the Chinese economy. So they made sure that the Chinese economy was not affected by manipulating several channels of the global supply chain and delaying the news that this can transmit from human to human. And in this endeavor, the World Health Organization played hand in glove, and that institution is also compromised, as we know now. And this led to the pandemic becoming what it is. One thing is death, but people seem to forget to understand the link between human health and economy. Because even if virus had not spread, right? If global economy crashes because of any other incident, that's going to be as disastrous as a health disaster, which is what happened. Countries' economies tanked. People lost their jobs, as a result of which people lost lives. And in fact, in 2020, as soon as the pandemic began, within a few months, the world's economy was pushed back to the economic status of 1997. I heard this from a guy, a well-known guy who is in the stock market industry. So the world's economy, I repeat, the world's economy was pushed back to 1997 time. So that's what the pandemic did. And it all happened because a regime was allowed to get away with lying to the world. And today we are where we are now. And unfortunately, tragically, sadly speaking, uh, the world has woken up way too late for this. Even now, it may be a tad too late for the pandemic to be reversed, but we can prevent future things like this from happening. I think the solution lies in the rest of the world getting together, forgetting their differences, and dealing with this regime. Again, it's a regime that matters, not the people. The people are anyway suffering within China, within the borders. It's a regime that matters. It's a regime that is being controlled by one community. I think it's a Han dynasty, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can correct me. and Han dynasty. They want to control China, and they call themselves communists, but they are as far from communism as one can get, because communism is generally practiced, it will give. It is meant to provide succor and relief to everybody, irrespective of where they come from. But it has failed all over the world, and therefore the Chinese regime knows that it has failed, and therefore they are actually what China is doing is a kind of an oligarchy, autocracy, autocratic dictatorial regime under the garb of communism. And that's all I have to say for now. And the kind of global geopolitical equations that are changing now are for the good. Be it Australia realigning itself, going away from China, or India taking steps to capture the global market that is being made available. All these things are good, and that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Parth. Yeah, let's do rooms on the origins of COVID whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. See,
Okay,
San, I think I told you once in a close room that I can speak for 3 hours or 4 hours on an entire day. It's not a problem. But then that is different from having some other experts and having like an interactive discussion. That's why I'm waiting for these people.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, it's more effective. Yeah, welcome back, Andolan. I think it's very late for you. Any last comments? We're about, unless you want to keep it open.
Up to you, because I'm gonna take it depend now. So I think a good amount of points which have come into this room, and we have recorded this room. If anybody has missed the discussion since the beginning, can refer to the replays, which will be available maybe a couple of minutes after we close this room. And Sam, over to you if you want to make a concluding remark. Otherwise, we can thank the speakers and the participants and close the room.
Yeah, thank you, Andolan. Jay, any last comments? I think you already made, unless you want to say something
Yeah,
again.
I'm good. Yeah, let's.
Okay. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming. This is a wonderful session. We had a lot of good points raised. Please feel free to share it with your friends. It will be recorded. We will be doing such rooms in future as well. We will be turning our gaze on outsiders, the adversaries of our country, China, Pakistan, what have you. The China is the least talked about subject in our community, so we know very little about the inside workings of CCP and China. So this is our feeble attempt to shed some light on those aspects, but we will be doubling down on this. We will be doing more and more rooms with a lot of content, with a lot of experts in the field. Like Parth was saying, we will be inviting subject matter experts in specific fields like COVID or human rights in China and all those things. Please make sure you join us in those rooms as well. Once again, thank you everyone for coming. With that, I'm going to close the room. Have a nice day. Good night, wherever you are. Hope to see you again in our future rooms. Thank you so much.
This video was made possible by Creative Contents.